Magneto has been around since the early days of Marvel, which means he's got quite the history. Grab a snack and your water bottle, we are in this together. Okay, so Magneto is born Max Eisenhart. He is Jewish, and this next point is very important. It informs almost every choice he makes in his life. He was born during the Second World War in Germany. He wasn't treated well in school, but he did develop a crush on a girl named Magda. His family relocated to Poland, but that wasn't safe for long, and Max ended up in a camp. Well, there he had to see his friends get experimented on, along with all the other horrors, so he's not doing well. There was literally only one good thing that came out of the entire situation. Max found Magda again, and the pair were able to escape together. They fell in love, got married, and then had a kid. It was looking up for our guy, which is why it all literally came crashing down shortly after. In the span of one day, he discovered his mutant power of magnetism, watched his daughter take a one-way trip to the ground while he was held down by soldiers, then eliminated said soldiers using his new powers, which scared his wife so bad she literally ran away from him, tried to lay his daughter to rest, but then was attacked again by soldiers. Magda was unknowingly pregnant with twins when she ran. For a long time, it was established that those twins were Wanda and Pietro, but that's been retconned. They are not his kids. More on that later. Max wanted to search for his wife, so he took on a new name, Eric Lensher. He found out she passed away, so he added Magnus to his middle name. He moved to Israel and started volunteering in a psychiatric hospital. This decision was going to change his life forever, because in that very same hospital was Charles Xavier. At this point, being a mutant was a very bad thing, so the pair would be getting in debates with each other about mutants on Earth, not knowing the other was just like them. It was through their debates that we get a glimpse into what the conflict between these two is going to be. Charles sees the idea humans and mutants can exist together peacefully, but Eric, with his dark past, doesn't think that. He is in the boat of humanity will not let mutants rest, and they haven't let him rest ever, so I see where he's coming from. Eric realizes that he and Charles just aren't going to find a middle ground, so he leaves. The next thing our guy does is actually pretty heroic. He uses his powers to track down Yahtzee with an N war criminals. He is supposed to give the criminals to the government that sent him out, but instead he's giving them to Israel for trial. For most part, no one really cares until it's someone they care about. When Magnus tries to give over someone they actually wanted, Magnus's agency decides to end his girlfriend at the time. In front of him. He doesn't take that well, then ending the people who did that to his girl. Now Magnus really doesn't believe in human kindness anymore and takes up his most famous name, Magneto. Magneto goes away for a bit to regroup, then eventually heads to Brooklyn, New York to gather up mutants for his campaign against humans. To move undetected, we have another name change. Magneto is now going by Michael Xavier, but only on his passports and documents. To his few friends, he is still either Magnus or Eric. His famous red and purple ensemble is courtesy of Cassandra Michaels. Magneto wanted to fit in with all the other heroes and villains of the Earth. If everyone else has a fun little outfit, he should get one too. Well, on a date with Cassandra, the pair are attacked by a monster. This fight is important because it's the first time he ever wore his iconic costume, but he also briefly considered the notion of being a hero. Magneto had an affair with a married woman shortly after, Susanna, which resulted in a child, Lorna, later Polaris. Susanna hid the child's actual father from her husband Arnold. Arnold decided to confront Susanna about her infidelity on a plane with their daughter present. Lorna didn't take the fighting very well, and her powers accidentally crashed the plane. Her parents didn't make it. She created a magnetic pulse so big that Magneto was drawn to it and found her. But the life he led wasn't for a child, so he got her memories rewritten, and then we don't see her for a while. A lot later, after the plane crash, Magneto returns, but this time with a fancy helmet. It's designed to be like a telepathy shield. It also looks great. He also spent his time away building an orbital asteroid M. It was to be the home to him and his Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. He got a few mutants on the team, but most notably he recruited his maybe not kids, Wanda and Pietro. He didn't know that these two were possibly his kids when he recruited them. Wanda and Pietro didn't want to be there, but they felt they owed Magneto because he saved their lives. At this point in his journey, Magneto is almost certifiably insane. Turns out the more he uses and abuses his powers, the more insane he becomes. It probably took a lot to build Asteroid M. Okay, the X-Men and the Brotherhood. Magneto tries to take over humanity a few different ways. He is beaten by the X-Men each time. Frustrated, he kidnapped the X-Men Angel, and then in the fight to get Angel back, Asteroid M was destroyed. The X-Men escape with Angel in an escape pod, but after the X-Men reach the Earth, the pod goes back up. Magneto is able to use his power to pull the pod up from Earth. Powerful dude. And then it's presumed the Brotherhood make it out, land somewhere on Earth. Later, there was a brief moment where Magneto fought with an evolutionary, but no one remembers because when the evolutionary left, he erased everyone's memories. So that means Magneto is left more insane and angry than when he started, and he doesn't know why. Magneto is now trying to recruit Brotherhood members. He was captured by someone called Stranger. He is an alien scientist that Magneto wanted to recruit. Magneto's disappearance left an opening for Wanda and Pietro to join the Avengers. That's the end of that Brotherhood. Gone. Magneto doesn't like being captured and escapes, recaptured, returned to Earth again. When he gets back, this is important, he takes Wanda and Pietro with him to the United Nations and demands that mutants get their own country. He still doesn't believe it's safe for mutants in the regular world. The twins send for the X-Men come and get them, and Magneto ends up in some water, left to drown, but he uses his powers to burrow through the Earth. He ends up burrowing far enough that he finds something called the Savage Land, a powerful place that he set off to rule. His rule didn't last long, the X-Men took him out. Later, he found a bunch of alien equipment that he used to create Alpha, the ultimate mutant. This Alpha guy rebelled against Magneto and turned him into a baby! Baby Magneto. Everyone just kind of hoped that they could re-raise Magneto to be a better person. He's just a baby. Not for long, he was turned back, but younger than before the baby curse, so now he's young again. More fights with the X-Men, then he makes a new evil Brotherhood. The new evil squad fails a mission, and Magneto abandons them. Moving on, Magneto decides that he wants to end the nuclear arms race by taking over every government in the world. He really gives it his all, but when he ends a mutant kid, he reflects on his life and how this was never his plan. His remorse calls him to abandon his world conquest. In this window of Magneto maybe thinking of abandoning evil, Professor X approaches with Moira McTaggart. She gets reborn every time she dies, and when that happens, she can reset the timeline. She sees Magneto fail over and over again, so Professor X goes to him with this info and basically says, on our own we always fail, but together we can actually make a mutant-safe world. Magneto, on board. So now he's like good guy adjacent. Professor X gets kidnapped and hooked up to a machine that would use his telepathy to end all living mutants. Magneto helps save the day by distracting the professor while the X-Men destroy the machine, but then when it's all over, they once again are not seeing eye to eye and part ways. Magneto later appeared as a participant in the Secret Wars. Secret Wars was a third party basically stealing a bunch of heroes and villains to fight each other to win a prize. The entire thing was weird enough to make Magneto reflect on the similarities between mutants and mankind, a feat for him. He seduced the Wasp at one point, helped the X-Men battle Galactus, everybody died, everyone's brought back to life, the heroes prevailed, Magneto is now on the good side, then Mr. Fantastic beams everybody back to Earth, Magneto to Asteroid M. Asteroid M is now at version 2. Asteroid M is destroyed again. Right around this time, the Mutant Registration Act was passed, and now it is illegal to be an unregistered mutant. The thing that made Secret Wars was the Beyonder. When Magneto senses that he's coming back, he allies himself with the X-Men again. During this time, Magneto visits a memorial site and is attacked there by Freedom Force. He gives up to trial by the World Court. Do you know what you have to do to go to trial in front of the World Court? Trial is interrupted and Professor X is badly injured to the point where he can't run the school for gifted youngsters. Magneto is put in charge of the school and is now an X-Men. Magneto has an era in the Hellfire Club, not from Stranger Things. It started as a political socialite club thing, so it has a lot of important connections. Magneto as a member worked out really well for the X-Men. It helped give them extra protection from attackers and access to government secrets. What hero wouldn't want that? Magneto hears that parts of his Asteroid M are scattered around Earth. Quest time, he is off to find them. The Avengers can't seem to accept that Magneto is trying to turn a new leaf and keep trying to get him. The X-Men keep saving him. Magneto reveals he equipped his helmet with tech to control any mind. But again, the leaf is turned, so he won't use it for bad. What he does use it for is his second trial in the World Court. He thinks that if the World Court were to execute him, that would start a human-mutant war, so he uses his helmet to make the judge acquit him. After this, Magneto destroyed it and was back back at the school. Later, Magneto left the school and the Hellfire Club, but he had prepared for it. He had rebuilt Asteroid M again. He returned to his villain ways because he felt he could never properly stand in for Professor X. During this era, he participated in acts of vengeance alongside other prominent villains. He also used that time to get close to and confront Red Skull, who you may recall as someone on the wrong side of World War II. He left the Red Skull in severe solitary confinement to reflect on the horrors he helped commit. Remember Magneto's origin and what he lived through at the start of his life? That is why. Magneto was ready to retire. He built a new orbital base and wanted to just live his life. No rest for the wicked. A new group of mutants showed up looking for him. They inspired Magneto to try again to make a mutant safe space. He tried to do it with Asteroid M. X-Men and many world governments said no. Pretty soon he starts up his war with humans and the X-Men again. The UN activated Magneto protocols. Do you know what you have to do to have the UN develop security protocols just for you? The protocol messes with Earth's magnetic field enough that Magneto can't use his powers on Earth. If he's off-world, he can't come back. Magneto's not happy, and he sends out a pulse wave so powerful it knocks out every electronic device on the Earth. Professor X stopped Magneto by shutting down his mind. Magneto's out of the game for a while until this guy named Joseph appears, claiming to be Magneto. He looks like a young Magneto, he's got the skill set, but it's not him because the real Magneto shows up later. Turns out that guy was a clone. Magneto briefly took over the Earth's magnetosphere to blackmail the UN into giving mutants a home. He got an island, but the people of that island fought back. Magneto won. He used a lot of power in that fight, so he was in recovery. While recovering, these things called Mega Centennials attacked and almost killed him, but they didn't. He was hidden away by his followers. The ideas of Magneto grew while he was away, and many mutants joined his side. They even had merch. While Magneto was MIA, this guy named Zorn showed up, pretended to be Magneto. Well, actually, he was Zorn pretending to be Magneto, pretending to be Zorn. Long story, we cover it in top 10 worst Marvel retcons we still can't believe if you want to check it out. The important thing is everyone thinks Magneto is dead by the end of it all. We have made it to Mutant M-Day. Scarlet Witch goes off the rails. She absolutely decimates the mutant population of Earth. Magneto, still alive, he just has no powers. Brief villain period, but soon joins the X-Men again. He gets framed for a crime in the middle of his redemption campaign. He was framed by Joseph, his clone. Joseph gets locked in X-Jail, done with that. The universe gets destroyed again, then restored. Magneto made a new Asteroid M and founded a new brotherhood. He's consistent. We are at the creation of Krakoa, finally! Krakoa is the mutant safe haven Magneto always dreamed of. The governments liked Krakoa because mutants could use it to create cures for diseases. It's a win-win situation. Everything is going great. There is a Hellfire party and Magneto pulls Wanda aside. He tells her he will always be her father and it's super sweet. They hug it out. Forgot to mention, before in 2015 it was revealed that Wanda and Pietro were not actually Magneto's kids. Wanda creates a family curse. Magneto's unaffected, so that's what makes this moment in the 2021 feature extra sweet. Okay, back into it. Wanda drops during the conversation that she's going to bring everybody back who died, but to do that, she must die. Magneto is tasked with reviving her, and it works. We're almost there, everybody. One day, while Professor X and Magneto were in a meeting, they get a distress call from Moira. Remember her? Only when they get to her, she's not there, disappeared. What is there is villain Nimrod and soldiers. They battle, they actually die, but they are revived. The whole thing was stressful enough to make Magneto retire to Arakko, so not really retirement. There was a big battle with the Eternal Uranus. He put up a fight, but ultimately didn't make it. Magneto I'm talking about. The perfect send-off for Magneto. One of the other, Eternals people turns into his first daughter, Anya, to wave him off as he dies, and I cried when I read this.
Number 10. Doctor Doom loses his cool and his cape. In Marvel Superheroes Volume 2, Issue 8 out of the 90s, we get to see the brilliant Doctor Doom take on Iron Man and Squirrel Girl. While he handily manages to defeat Iron Man, he underestimates Squirrel Girl, just like Iron Man does earlier in the comic. This turns out to be a big mistake, and she gets a bunch of squirrels to sneak into his ship and attack him, nibbling away at his armor. Not only does he start freaking out trying to fling squirrels off of himself, which is admittedly pretty funny, but he then loses it to the point that he decides to open his emergency hatch on his ship and escape by plummeting to the ground. I love how when supervillains get embarrassed, they just say screw it to their own safety and do whatever they can to get out of the situation. Poor Doctor Doom also loses his cape in the process. How embarrassing. Number 9. Dormammu gets trapped in a time loop. Dormammu gets annoyed into losing his cool in the MCU's film Doctor Strange. This is a huge villain for Doctor Strange to be going up against, especially in his origin story. But Doctor Strange is kind of a mystical progeny, as he proves when he goes up against Dormammu. He causes Dormammu to give into his frustration when he continues to time loop his defeat to Dormammu, continuing to come back and asking the villain to bargain with him. The villain's response is to kill Doctor Strange each time in anger out of being trapped. Finally, Dormammu is so annoyed that he demands to be set free of this time loop and have this stop. Doctor Strange is willing to do so in exchange for his world being free of Dormammu's torment forever. Surprisingly, the supervillain is so bothered and frustrated by the loop that he agrees. Number 8. Lex Luthor's plan backfires. In the original Action comic series, Lex Luthor comes up with a brilliant and deranged plan to try and trap Superman in another dimension. The plot involves having himself fall in love with a clone of Angela Blake and then having Superman kiss her on his wedding day, whereby both will be transported to the L-Zone, trapped forever. This plan gets set in motion after Lex Luthor wipes his memories of the actual plot, so that Superman will never suspect him. Unfortunately, Superman escapes this attempt to be trapped, leaving Lex to mourn uncontrollably the loss of the terminally ill woman that he still loves, cause you know, he still fell in love with her, so. Normally, I'm looking to blame superheroes for these freakouts, but really, Lex has no one to blame but himself in this scenario, causing his own freakout. Number 7. Harley Quinn snaps at Duella Dent. In the New 52, we were introduced to a character who claimed to be Joker's daughter, despite the fact that her name makes you think of Two-Face more, Duella Dent. When Harley Quinn and Duella are forced to work together on the Suicide Squad, the two constantly bump heads and show a distaste for one another. This feud comes to a boiling point when, in the new Suicide Squad series, Harley is accused of being too weak for the Joker by Duella, who wears the Joker's old skinned face on top of her own. Creepy. Harley tackles her through a wall and throws her into oncoming traffic before pummeling her into unconsciousness, warning Duella that the Joker isn't a game, and showing that she herself snapped as a result of thinking Duella is basically a fool for liking him at all, and a fool for thinking that Harley still wants him back. This fight ends with Harley victorious and declaring to Manta that she is helping Duella, and that she is a psychiatrist. This might be one of my favorite freakouts of Harley's, as it feels so deserved. Duella can be majorly annoying in the comics. Number 6. Edward Nygma becomes a killer in the show Gotham. Get ready because this one is a sad freakout. In the television series Gotham, we get to explore the backstory of many of Gotham's dark characters. One such character is the supervillain the Riddler, who is Edward Nygma at the time, a forensic investigator. He loves a woman named Kris Kringle who is being abused by her boyfriend. When Nygma finds this out, he tries to put a stop to it. The effort results in a fight with Kringle's boyfriend, Tom Doherty, whom Edward Nygma kills. Feeling pretty good about what he's done, he confesses this to Kris, as well as his love for her. She does not take this information well and calls him a murderer, stalker, and psychopath. Nygma does not take well to being called a psychopath, and he snaps. The two get into a fight, and Nygma accidentally suffocates and chokes Kris while simply trying to get her to listen as he explains his actions, resulting in her death. Number 5. Carnage all day, every day. Cletus Cassidy is a deranged serial killer who is basically constantly freaking out all day, every day. One of the biggest buttons you can push for the psychotic serial killer is trying to cure him. He really does not respond well to people trying to understand his mind. Let's just say if he were a killer featured on Netflix's Mindhunter, it would not end well for the FBI. One particular example of this is when a psychiatrist tries to understand Cletus's thoughts and mind in the comic Carnage Mind Bomb. This does not end well for the psychiatrist, who Cletus infects with his own mind, giving him a taste of what he wants, and turning the psychiatrist into a cannibal as a result. And when the guards come to save him from Carnage, he attempts to eat them. So yeah, moral of the story, don't try to cure Carnage. Don't try to cure Cletus. Not gonna work out well for you. Number 4. Kingpin's Fury. Kingpin's anger problems are well documented, but especially highlighted in the Daredevil series, where we see Kingpin freak out as a result of some severe PTSD. As a young boy, he's mocked by his abusive father, who also often beats his mom. One day, he decides he can't take it and wants to stand up to his dad. While his dad is furiously beating his mother, he grabs a hammer. His dad looks on at him in disappointment, asking what he plans to do with that hammer. When his son gives him no response, he turns back to Wilson's mom to resume the beating. It's then the young Wilson Fisk snaps and smashes the back of his dad's head with the hammer. Feeling a surge of confidence and anger, he continues to break down, frantically dealing blow after blow to his father's already smashed skull. And so the crime lord was born, and you almost feel bad for him. Number 3. Mysterio in Far From Home. In Spider-Man Far From Home, Quentin Beck seems to be a supervillain who has everything figured out. That is, until anything in his plans begins to go wrong. We then just see how fragile and frantic Mysterio is. He desperately wants to be seen as a hero, and though he is a charismatic genius who can fortunately find a way to spin anything in his favor, when he faces off with Peter's Spider-Man, we see him lose it, to the point that he risks his own safety. He taunts Spider-Man with the Edith Tech glasses, forcing him to walk down a hallway filled with illusions in order to get them. But Spider-Man closes his eyes and we see just how powerful of a power his spidey sense can be. Frustrated as Spider-Man gets closer and destroys all of his drones, Quentin questions as to why the drones he has left are not firing at Spider-Man. The system responds, saying that Quentin himself is in the strike zone. He yells, urging them to strike anyways. As a result, he gets shot and we see him die. But does he? It's Mysterio, so who really knows? Number 2. Magneto in X-Men Age of Apocalypse. Well, I'll be the first to admit that Age of Apocalypse had its issues as a film, like the scene where Jean Grey shouts Apocalypse to death. There are a few things in the movie that were really done well. One, I really love Michael Fassbender as Magneto and the backstory they gave his character in the film, which was heartbreaking. Eric saves a man from the mines with his mutant powers and is found out. As a result, he is captured when soldiers threaten his family, giving himself up. Turns out his daughter has some mutant abilities too and sends a flock of birds to attack the soldiers. In the chaos, one of the soldiers accidentally releases an arrow which ends up hitting and killing both daughter and wife. What were they doing with arrows? Why didn't they have guns? Oh well. Eric loses it, shouting up to the heavens, and uses a locket to single-handedly kill all of the soldiers. Whew. Number 1. Joker in Death of the Family. In Death of the Family, Batman actually gets the best of the Joker for once. Now, you have to remember that the Joker is a character who has been shown to take on Scarecrow's fear toxin without seemingly any problem, revealing that he's really not afraid of anything. In fact, he enjoyed his exposure to the fear toxin, eerily enough. But there is one thing the Joker seems to be unable to deal with: himself. Or more specifically, his true identity. In Death of the Family, Joker plots to take out the entire Bat family in an effort to mess up Batman and obviously bring the two arch nemeses closer together. This plot, however, ends in his ultimate demise. Joker is about to fall off a cliff when Batman grabs a hold of him, saying he can't go like that, by accident. Batman then confesses he knows Joker's true origins and identity, and whispers the name of his former self into Joker's ear. This results in Joker full on flipping out, putting his shock buzzer on Batman's mouth and causing himself to be dropped to his demise below, as his former face also falls off. This is during that time that Joker had his face skinned and then wore it around over top of his face just to look even more terrifying. Ugh.
Coming in at number 10 today is Galactus. Being one of the constants in Marvel Comics since 1965, Galactus is a big name in comic books, and yet I feel like there's a good chunk of people who may not know his origins. Galactus was known originally as the space explorer Galen from a planet called Ta. The civilization he belongs to was the most advanced of any of the known universes at that time, and Galen was a genetically engineered child of one of Ta's greatest scientists. But Galen and his society existed in the previous iteration of the Marvel multiverse, the Sixth Cosmos. Essentially, in Marvel, the universe starts off as a cosmic egg, or a sphere of disorganized, dense, compact matter. This sphere undergoes a big bang that hurls the matter outwards, where it eventually condenses into stars, planets, moons, and all that good stuff. It all expands in size for billions of years, and then it begins to go in reverse, undergoing a quote crunch over the next billions of years, all heading toward a central point in the universe where it all restarts again. That, or it was a giant entity known as the Black Winter. Either way, Galen and the surviving people of Ta attempted to face the end of the universe by leaving their planet on a ship. Sadly, the cataclysm caught up with the ship and everyone passed except for Galen, who was approached by the sentience of the universe, who merged his power with Galen, allowing him to survive as Galactus, the Devourer of Worlds, in the next cosmos. This one. Number 9. Parasite, Joshua Michael Allen. When talking about the origin story of the villain Parasite, there are a few different stories we can tell, but they're all nuts. The most current version of Parasite is a guy who used to go by the name Joshua Michael Allen. Josh was originally a bike courier from Metropolis, but his life changed when he very randomly came face to face with a massive green booger-looking monster. He was having a rough time, and so he kinda snapped, attacking the monster and getting a massive electric shock. He then lost consciousness. When he came to, he was diagnosed as suffering from alien flu. He also lost his job and got dumped by his GF in the same stroke, so that's pretty sad. It was then that he was called into Star Labs to be checked for the virus. Supervillains. All of a sudden, a random explosion at the lab took out everyone nearby and transformed Joshua into a purple grotesque monster called Parasite. As Parasite, he uncontrollably, and suffering from a crazy level of hunger, drained the energy of people around him, leaving them as husks. However, the Man of Steel came to intervene, and when Parasite touched Superman, he gained way more energy than he had from anyone before. From that point forward, leeching metahuman powers became his new obsession. Number 8. Solomon Grundy. Cyrus Gold lived a pretty miserable life. His father, Gold Sr., had moved to Gotham City to gain fame and fortune, and failed miserably. The elder Gold began to use his family as a way to vent off the hate he felt towards his superiors. For years, the young Cyrus Gold was mistreated, coming to a head when his mother packed her belongings, kissed him goodbye, and abandoned him alone with his horrible father. Not too much later, Cyrus snuck down to the docks to watch his father work when a crate fell on top of Cyrus Gold's father, taking him out of the picture instantly. Now, Cyrus Gold was all alone. Forced to survive on nothing, he swore to himself to make his own riches and power. And miraculously, a mysterious stranger offered Cyrus the deal of a lifetime. He could become rich and powerful if he only served the stranger until the day he died. Cyrus Gold shook the stranger's hand, and what do you know? He soon became wealthy and powerful, but by ways not very honest. He took people's lives, including his mother and various people who had bullied him in the past. He stole, and he became a horrible mobster, notorious for dumping the bodies of his victims in the waters of Slaughter Swamp. During this period, Cyrus somehow got married and had a little boy and a little girl as well. Initially, they were a happy family, but Cyrus became a worse and worse husband until, in a fit of rage, Cyrus took his wife's life. A mob formed and chased him into the swamps. Now, Cyrus didn't want to go by the mob's hands, and subsequently, he stuck himself through the heart, sinking into the cursed waters of Slaughter Swamp. Now, the swamp, filled with unknown acids and chemicals, bonded to the preserving corpse of Cyrus Gold, fusing his body through time with wood, stone, and pretty much anything else that was unlucky enough to fall into the swamp. 50 years later, after his passing, something happened. In the dead of night, a moaning was heard. The waters rippled and parted as a hideously decayed white hand reached out. That night, from the remains of a selfish and evil man, came a hulking avatar of the Grey, known only as Solomon Grundy, naming himself after a famous poem. That was a long one, I'm sorry. Number 7. Killer Croc. As with most DC characters, Killer Croc, aka Waylon Jones, has two main origin stories: the pre- and post-Flashpoint origins, with some minor differences. Born in a slum in Tampa, Florida, Waylon was born with a congenital medical condition that caused him to have scaly, thick skin and reptilian features, which led to the Croc part of his name. This is true in both origins, although post-Flashpoint this condition was given a bit more depth as Waylon tried to scrub away the scales for years. Now, with his mother passing away from his birth and his father abandoning the little Croc, Waylon was raised by his aunt, but she had a bit of a problem with the drinky. As a teenager, Croc had no friends and was bullied for his medical condition, as is usually the case in a villain origin story. So, instead, Waylon grew up and found himself literally wrestling alligators as part of carnivals. Post-Flashpoint, this was the Gotham Circus, where he even came into contact with the Flying Graysons. This was where he earned the name Killer Croc, but carnivals aren't exactly swimming in the cash, and post-Flashpoint, his boss was keeping his money, prompting Croc to bite off his arm. Croc soon realized that there was more money to be made in crime, so he set out to become Gotham's most powerful crime lord, taking out other rising criminals, gathering up some henchmen, and seizing control of the Tobacconist Club and/or the Gotham City sewers, bringing him into conflict with the Batman. Number 6. Professor Zoom. Hunter Zolomon was already starting off life with a bit of a disadvantage, and that's because his dad was a notorious killer who lost his life to the police after taking the life of Hunter's mother. So yeah, it was pretty bad. Trying to move on with his life though, Hunter became obsessed with understanding the criminal mind, studying psychology and criminology in college, and eventually joining the FBI alongside his girlfriend, whom he later married. Nice. Unfortunately though, during one case, Hunter made a bad call regarding a criminal they were after, and it resulted in Ashley's father losing his life. Hunter actually was correct, but the whole thing was orchestrated by Reverse Flash, Eobard Thawne. Ashley left Hunter and the FBI terminated his employment, leaving Hunter with a damaged knee due to the case and a cane for walking. After getting a job in Keystone City as a profiler, he was eventually paralyzed by Gorilla Grodd. After forming a relationship with Wally West, Hunter begged Flash to go back in time and change his life, but the speedster refused. Hunter took things into his own hands and stole the cosmic treadmill, which exploded, granting Hunter the power to live between the seconds of time and making him Zoom, the second Reverse Flash. Number 5. Superboy Prime. Superboy Prime was initially a normal child on an Earth known as Prime Earth that didn't really have any superheroes. Or they had superheroes in the exact same way that we do, in comic books and entertainment media. This young future supervillain was adopted by Jerry and Naomi Kent, who named him Clark, which was both Naomi's middle name and the fictional comic book character Superman in their world. Well, it turns out that Clark really was Kal-El, teleported to Earth Prime before the Krypton of this universe was destroyed when its sun went kaboob. Discovering his Kryptonian abilities thanks to the passing of Halley's Comet, while coincidentally dressed as Superman at a Halloween party, this Superboy left his Prime Earth reality shortly afterwards. As it happens, the Earth 1 Superman just happened to be passing by and asked him to join other heroes in protecting reality itself from the Anti-Monitor during the Crisis on Infinite Earths. His reward, along with Alexander Luthor Jr. of Earth 3, was a chance to escape to a heavenly pocket dimension where he doesn't age. Unfortunately, being able to watch the post-crisis Earth that was getting darker and darker without being able to be a part of it, losing his childhood, knowing that he could never grow up to be Superman, his idol of Earth 2, and feeling like the heroes of post-crisis Earth were absolute dog water, Superboy Prime became a pretty bitter guy. He escaped with Alexander and instigated the Infinite Crisis, and then he went on to be an incredibly despicable bad guy. Number 4. Doomsday. Doomsday is essentially just pure destruction. He was able to bring down the Justice League and take the life of Earth's premier hero, Superman, in his first appearance. Doomsday doesn't speak, he can't be reasoned with, and the only way to stop him is to beat him harder than he will beat you. That's because Doomsday was created on the planet Krypton as the ultimate life form, tested against that planet's harsh environment and eventually against the Kryptonians themselves. Doomsday's whole life cycle involves it being killed and then coming back stronger than whatever took it out. Over decades and decades that involved literal thousands of repeated deaths, Doomsday essentially became a nearly undefeatable monster with no other thought process beyond destroying everything in front of him and just moving on to the next thing. All he does is punch things to pieces, and the only way to stop him is to try and punch him to pieces however you can before he can punch you to pieces. Number 3. The Maestro Hulk. Maestro is the dystopian future version of the Hulk, the variant of Hulk that haunts his own dreams. He rules over the creatively named city, Dystopia, as an incredibly evil and immoral dictator. Years and years and years of radiation due to the nuclear conflict that spawned this dystopian future had made Maestro sick and villainous, as well as twice as strong as the base level Hulk, but with all the intelligence of Banner to boot. This bearded green behemoth has been a fan favorite character since his introduction in the Future Imperfect storyline, and his backstory, fighting the Human Torch, Dr. Doom, Namor the Submariner, and Abomination, is pretty intense, and it's a super fun read. Not to mention his debut where he fights the Incredible Hulk and defeats him like it's absolutely nothing to him. Super cool, you should check it out. Number 2. Vulcan. The third and youngest Summers brother, Gabriel Summers, has been used by multiple different parties since his birth. His mother, Catherine Summers, had her life taken by the Shi'ar Emperor D'Ken as a punishment for his father, Christopher Summers' own actions. He was basically paying for his father's crimes, which sucks. The Shi'ar took Gabriel and artificially aged him up and essentially used him back on Earth. So he was robbed of his childhood, which essentially meant that Vulcan has a tendency to act like a huge brat sometimes. It's a big old baby. After being saved and mentored by Moira McTaggart, Vulcan was drafted into an early team of Professor X's X-Men that got almost completely perished at the hands of Krakoa. Professor X then used his powers to wipe everyone's mind of the memory of this team of X-Men, which was incredibly messed up. Unbeknownst to Xavier though, Vulcan absorbed the energies of his teammates and was actually able to survive, spending years in Earth's orbit just kind of inert and floating there until the events of M-Day awoke him. After coming back and fighting the X-Men and Xavier for some understandable vengeance, Gabriel took off into space and essentially took control of the Shi'ar Empire, marrying the the black sheep of the Shi'ar royal family and using his massive power to beat the royal guard, take the life of Deacon, and place himself on the throne. And finally, in at number 1, it's Thanos. Look, I know we all love Thanos as a villain. He's terribly ruthless, massively intelligent, and sickeningly powerful. But my lord, is his origin messed up. Thanos was born on Titan, a moon of Saturn, and is technically an Eternal. Unfortunately though, Thanos was born with a deviant gene, which made him very different looking from the rest of the Titan Eternals, with purple thick hide-like skin and a much larger body. These differences caused Thanos' mom to try and change his life status from alive to lights out, and when that failed, he was ruthlessly bullied as he grew up. As such, Thanos wasn't the happiest child, and he distanced himself from his society, instead investing himself in science, life and death, and he also started dissecting animals all Dahmer-like. Thanos found he has a thing for death. In fact, he met and started to fall in love with the literal physical embodiment of death in Marvel Comics, Mistress Death. To prove his love for her, he would commit some of the worst crimes, starting with the dissection of his mom, the bombardment of his home world, and eventually assembling the Infinity Stones and trying to wield the Cosmic Cube to destroy all life in the universe.
Number 10. Plant Man. Granted, there are 2 different versions of Plant Man in Marvel Comics, but for our purpose, I would like to talk about Samuel Smithers, a man who worked for years with a botanist and was working on perfecting a plant ray that would allow him to increase the IQ of plants, which he believed to be capable of intelligence. Sure, why not? After the botanist he was studying under died, he moved to the US from the UK, but was unqualified in terms of his schooling to find a job where he could continue his research. Instead, he worked as a gardener, but instead of doing his job of tending to the plants and cutting the grass, he spent more time working on his invention, causing him to get fired. Fortunately, a bolt of lightning struck his device, and apparently that was all it needed to become fully functional. Smithers now realized that he could not only increase the plant's IQ, but command them with his ray. Does he want world domination to prove to the world his brilliance and terrorize them with his finished invention? Nope, he just wants to get revenge for getting fired. Even Paul, the new Plant Man's motivation for villainy, is pretty ridiculous. He turned to a life of crime so he could make more than minimum wage after being caught stealing variant covers in the comic book store where he worked. Pretty lame. Although some of those variant covers are really nice, so I kind of get it. Number 9. Sports Master. Lawrence Crusher Kroc was one of the worst sportsmen to play any sport, and he reportedly played them all, but he was also the dirtiest player around. He cheated in every sport and became barred from all of them. Infuriated, he decided to turn to a life of crime, despite the fact that he was still a trained athlete, so he could have become like a coach, possibly a fitness model, but no, crime was the only path for the Crusher. Oddly enough, in the comic where he was introduced, All American Comics Volume 1, Issue 85, Green Lantern is also keeping up with his career and sports apparently. Sure, why not? Sports Master's master plan is to set up a polo match where they will put all of the audience to sleep and rob them, but Green Lantern attends and handily foils it. Oh yeah, did I mention he usually just fights with sports equipment? Number 8. Lenny Luthor. In the film Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, Lex has a nephew who helps him escape from his prison sentence while he's working on a road gang. His motivation in the film seems somewhat unclear, appearing to be a villain simply due to the fact that he is related to one without any specific reason for wanting to defeat Superman. Perhaps it is because Lex is the only one who will put up with him because he's super annoying, or he's just doing it for an inheritance? But just because you're related to a villain doesn't mean you have to become their villainous sidekick. I guess this is based around the old adage, like uncle, like nephew. That's an adage, right? Number 7. Yon-Rogg. In the MCU film Captain Marvel, Yon-Rogg is painted as a villain whose motive is to recover and preserve Kree technology that could be used in a war against the Skrulls. His comic book counterpart does not have such a patriotic motivation, unfortunately. Yon-Rogg is a colonel who admittedly is painted as a villain when we meet him in Marvel Superheroes Volume 1, Issue 12, when he orders Captain Marvel to go down to Earth's surface alone as the Kree spaceship arrives at planet Earth. This is apparently against all standard protocol, but this act, as well as all of his villainous acts, stems from the fact that he is jealous of the captain, who has love of the ship's lovely medic, Una. The crazy thing about this origin story and motivation is that this feud between Yon-Rogg and Marvel continues even after Una dies in the comic. At that point, Yon-Rogg just seems to hate Marvel just for, I guess, thwarting him? Number 6. Calendar Man. This Batman villain was first introduced in Detective Comics Volume 1, Issue 259. Where did he come from? Why did he commit the crimes he did? None of these questions are ever really fully answered in that comic, but it looks like he did it because he could? Later incarnations of the Calendar Man are presented as a man obsessed with the calendar and dates. In his original appearance, he was a traveling magician from India who was in town for 5 days and decided to challenge Batman, performing 5 crimes in the 5 days he was there to prove that Batman couldn't catch him. He almost got away with it too, but Batman noticed in the newspaper that there was an announcement about the magician's shows and that he would be there for 5 days. The same 5 days that the crimes seemed to be committed on. The clue he gave Batman was that he was basing his crimes on the 5 seasons. Being from India, the 5th season was supposed to be a reference to the monsoon or rainy season, which Batman and Robin took a really long time to figure out. The real mystery here is why a successful magician felt it necessary to goad Batman into capturing him and why he turned to a life of crime in the first place. Like, if you're a successful magician, maybe just stick with that. Number 5. Paste Pot Pete. Paste Pot Pete was introduced in the 1960s in Strange Tales Volume 1, Issue 104. There he appears as a villain with a particularly powerful paste gun, which he uses to commit crimes by trapping those who get in his way in paste. His backstory was delved into in the 90s in Spider-Man Volume 1, Issue 91, where we learned that Peter Petruski was a brilliant scientist who invented the polymer substance he uses in his device. Now going by the name of Trapster, it's revealed to us that Peter could have just patented the substance and made himself a fortune, but instead he turned to a life of crime, believing I guess that was the better option. I'm sorry, in what world is that the better option? He'd already done a good amount of work toward producing an invention that would make him money without becoming a criminal. I don't understand. Number 4. Rainbow Raider. This Flash villain was first introduced in Flash Volume 1, Issue 286. He is Roy G. Bigelow. I know, get ready. As a young boy, Roy always wanted to be an artist, but he was born colorblind. Although his technique was perfect, the fact that his choice of colors when it came to his paintings was atrocious meant that he could never be a painter. Sigh. But wait a minute. Can he just paint in black and white? No, apparently not. His father worked hard to build him prisma goggles, which would give Roy the ability to see color, and on his deathbed handed them over to his son, saying that they would be his compensation. Roy interpreted this to mean that he would be compensated for years of being mocked as a painter and robbed of the ability to actually pursue his career by using the powers of the prisma goggles to start a life of crime. His goal? To steal priceless works of art and zap them of color so that no one can enjoy them, even though you can totally just enjoy a black and white painting. He can also shoot colors at people to make them feel emotions. For example, blue makes you sad. Cause yeah, that's how color rays work, apparently. Number 3. White Rabbit. Lorna Dodson first appears in Marvel Team-Ups Volume 1, Issue 131, featuring a team-up between Spider-Man and Frogman that is kind of adorable. When she was a young girl, she was raised as a proper lady, and to escape her strict and boring upbringing, she turned to books. How appropriate, considering us readers often escape in our own way through reading comics. That's where the comparison and relatability might end with Dodson though. She became obsessed with Alice in Wonderland throughout her childhood, and even in the lap of luxury, she was never quite happy. She was married off at a young age to a very old man who later died and left her a fortune. She could have done anything she wanted with this fortune, but the thing she wanted most was to become an Alice in Wonderland themed criminal. Yep. So that's why she became White Rabbit. Ultimately, she was just bored. Also, for someone who identifies as a bibliophile, she misquotes Plato, attributing the phrase, "if you want something done right, do it yourself," mistakenly to the ancient Greek philosopher, when it is often attributed as being a saying of Napoleon Bonaparte and the French playwright Charles-Guillaume Etienne. Maybe she didn't read their stuff, I don't know. Number 2. Film Freak. Burt Weston was a struggling actor who faked his death to try and gain some attention when he came back from the dead, and revealed that he'd survived. The only issue is that no one noticed he had died. Sad. No one in the public eye seemed to mourn him or care. As a result, Burt Weston stayed dead and Film Freak was born, a villain who quoted movies. Burt had always been obsessed with the villain roles, considering them meteor parts, so he decided to act out his fantasy of being a criminal by actually pursuing a life of crime. So, he can get some notoriety and possibly an award-winning film role, proving his abilities by adopting the mantles of famous movie villains like Norman Bates from Psycho. At least that was his original origin story. I don't make this stuff up. Number 1. Codpiece. This backstory is about, well, just what you think it's about. When Codpiece was a teenager in high school, he was turned down for a date because he was not big enough. The girl in school meant that he was not tall enough, of course, but he interpreted it in a different way. All throughout his life, he attributed all his failed romances to this one singular problem. What is a guy to do? Well, turn to a life of crime, I guess. He built himself a giant utility codpiece and attempted to use it to rob a bank in Doom Patrol Volume 2, Issue 70, but was stopped by Coagula, who dissolved his codpiece. No codmobile for him, I suppose.
Kicking off the list at number 10 is the Ultimate Red Skull. In the Ultimate Universe, Steve Rogers and his girlfriend at the time, Gail Richards, shared a sweet night of romance together way back in 1945, just before he went and got himself popsicled. 9 months later, out popped a sweet baby that the government decided needed to be kept a secret. They took the boy into foster care on a military base, training him to become a super soldier to take the place of his missing and frozen father. He soon became stronger and even more tactically skillful than Captain America was, but even though he seemed to be the perfect soldier, Rogers' son had in reality been carefully planning his escape. Now fast forward to 1963 when he was finally at the age of 17 and the son went off the handle, removing all the doctors and soldiers at his facility of their lives. If you didn't gather that this guy was absolutely insane, he also used a kitchen knife to remove the skin from his own head, officially and literally becoming the Red Skull. In rebellion against the system that created him, he becomes a mentally unstable assassin and tries to eventually steal Reed Richards' plans for the Cosmic Cube in order to use it to change history so he could grow up with his father. It was absolutely psychotic up until that very last point. Number 9. Dr. Doom. Victor Von Doom was the child of Romani people living in Latveria. His mother was a sorceress, and after her passing at the hands of Mephisto, resulting in her soul being held hostage by the Hell Lord, and the later passing of his father, Victor began to study her books, teaching himself the dark arts, while also developing a keen scientific mind which made him a legendary scientist and inventor at a very young age. This led to him being tracked down by the US military and offered further education in the United States. It was here that he met Reed Richards and the two became intellectual rivals. Doom wanted nothing more than to save his mother from the hold of Mephisto, so he became obsessed with developing a machine that could project the astral form of a being into other dimensions, seeing it as a way to free his mother's soul from Mephisto. One day, Reed Richards went into Doom's dorm without permission and saw that he was working on the device, but Reed saw it as an unstable dimensional portal to an unknown realm and pointed out all the ways that it wouldn't work. Doom refused to listen since he was peed off at Reed for going into his dorm and looking at his stuff, but also because Doom's plans were based on an understanding of the supernatural that Reed just didn't appreciate. Reed, however, was right, and the machine ended up blowing up in Doom's face, literally, causing him to be disfigured. Despite that initial failure, through magic and other means, once a year, every single year, Doom would challenge Mephisto for the fate of his mother's soul, and he almost always loses. Number 8. Ultimate Mr. Sinister. Again, in the Ultimate Universe, Mr. Sinister is reimagined as a former bioengineer who specialized in urban stealth and mind-altering substances to create a super soldier who could evade any form of detection and hypnotically persuade others. Unfortunately, his superiors refused to allow Nathaniel Essex to test his research on human subjects, so he experimented on himself and acquired superhuman powers. But he also became a schizophrenic street thug with a white tank top, weird tattoos, and a proclivity for gunning down mutants to please his Lord Apocalypse. But his Lord Apocalypse isn't even real and is just a hallucination / an effigy Sinister has constructed out of trash. This Lord Apocalypse inside of Sinister's head would preach about ushering in a, quote, final age of mutant dominance or the end of the world. But to do so, Sinister apparently had to remove 10 innocent mutants from existence. 4 issues of the X-Men chasing down a delusional mutant murderer were some of the best from the Ultimate X-Men's extended run. Number 7. Earth 17 Overman. On Earth 17, that appeared very briefly in Animal Man issue number 23, superheroes are a product of government experiments. The Superman of this universe is called Overman, and he was the first hero with all the other heroes being spawns of his own DNA. That seems pretty normal for a comic book. It feels very The Boys. But just like The Boys, things get really weird. Overman ends up catching some kind of promiscuously transmitted disease from another person, which somehow drives him completely insane. Overman destroys Earth 17's Justice League and reduces the entire world to rubble. And that was all before he gets his filthy paws on an incredibly powerful doomsday device that he intends to use to wipe Earth 17 out completely. But before he does that, he is temporarily transported to the main DC universe. The Crisis on Infinite Earths destroyed this reality, which seems like an effort by DC to destroy such a naughty Superman story. They even created different, less weird, but still evil iterations of Overman, like an Overman who became allied with the Axis powers in World War II. But the internet, we never forget that kind of thing, you weirdos. Number 6. Dexstar. It's true, the Red Lantern of Sector 2814, Dexter is an irrationally rage-filled kitten cat, and he's scary. But it's all because he really loved his owner, which is kinda sweet. Dexter's origin shows the cat Dexter with his owner when she is attacked by robbers who broke into her home. While Dexter tried his best to scratch the attackers, they ended up bringing a close to the life of Dexter's owner. When the police showed up on the scene though, Dexter was kicked out into the streets so he wouldn't contaminate the scene. So this cat lost his owner and his home. That's bad enough, but then two sickos from the streets found Dexter when he was trying to sleep, put him in a sack, and threw him into a river. This unbelievable and unfortunate sequence of events filled this poor little kitty with enough pure, unbridled rage that it caught the attention of Atrocitus, who called out to him and made Dexter a Red Lantern. With this newfound power of the Red Lantern ring, the Rage Kitty exacted sweet revenge on the sickos who sacked him and flew to say goodbye to his owner one last time, saying, in his little cat language, "I find who hurt you, I kill, I good kitty." Number 5. The Joker. There are many variations of the Joker's origin story, with no one version being officially accepted. And that's because he either doesn't remember the real one, doesn't want to tell anyone, or is just so insane that he makes up a new one every single time. It's part of what makes the Joker so compelling. The most popular of his origin stories, though, sees him as a civilian named Jack. Jack leaves behind a career as a chemical engineer to go into stand-up comedy. When he fails miserably, he turns to a gang of criminals in order to support his pregnant wife. The criminals name him Red Hood and set up a robbery at a chemical plant, threatening and or taking the life of his family in order to force Jack into working with them. At the plant, the gang are taken down by security, and in the terror of seeing Batman as he fled away, Red Hood / Jack falls into a vat of chemicals. When he emerged being drastically physically altered, he also ends up having a complete and very drastic psychotic breakdown and focuses obsessively on Batman for the rest of his life. Number 4. Monsieur Mallah and the Brain. When I tell you that a super intelligent French militant gorilla named Monsieur Mallah and a disembodied brain belonging to a French scientific genius and master criminal are not only the primary leaders of the Brotherhood of Evil, but are also in a relationship together, then you know this is gonna be wild. So, Monsieur Mallah and the Brain, who were villains to both the Doom Patrol and the Teen Titans, first appeared in Doom Patrol number 86 in 1964. Brain was once a scientist who experimented on the gorilla who would become Mallah, increasing Malah's intelligence. Unfortunately, an accident injured Ernst, the scientist, and Mallah had to remove Ernst's brain and place it in a technological holding device to keep him alive and able to communicate. And thus, the villainous duo were born. The two are almost always together, with Mallah usually carrying around the brain. Their story and even the characters themselves are odd to say the least, but so are the Doom Patrol, so it all just kind of makes sense in the end, doesn't it? Number 3. Bane. Bane was born inside the feared Pena Duro prison on Santa Prisca, an island in the Caribbean Sea, after his father, Edmund Dorrance, escaped and had the corrupt government transfer his life sentence to his unborn child. That alone is just so messed up. This child was forced to serve his father's prison sentence, is named Bane by a prison warden after he took the first of many lives while still growing up. Bane spends his time in prison building himself into the perfect specimen of physical and mental ability, teaching himself strategy, philosophy, languages, and mathematics, while also turning his body into the example of peak fitness and strength. Bane becomes the, quote, king of the prison and is its most feared inmate. Being such an incredible specimen of a human being, Bane is selected for use in a super soldier experimental program, being injected with a lethal substance called venom. But unlike any other before him, Bane not only survives, but he finds the venom further enhances his already outstanding physical abilities, but with the caveat that it must be taken every 12 hours. To help that, a system of tubes is installed on Bane to pump venom directly into his system. It's not too long after that Bane sets his sights on dominating Gotham City and its bat-themed protector. In at number 2, it's Cheetah. Cheetah was initially a famous archaeologist named Dr. Barbara Ann Minerva. She was a bit, I don't know what's the word, quirky, with an obsessive love of artifacts and not much of a care for other human beings. But still, she wasn't exactly evil, not at first. Minerva stumbled upon an ancient tribe in Africa that was protected by a female guardian with the powers of a cheetah. Super cool. So cool that when she is told the legend of this female hero by a witch doctor, she believes she can become the next cheetah. To do this, Minerva has to become the bride of a plant god by the name of Kartaga. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. She fulfills all of the requirements to become his bride, ingesting a mixture of human blood, berries, and his leaves, but while things seem to be going smoothly, she was not told the key requirement, that she needs to be a virgin. Since Minerva is not a virgin, she is instead cursed to suffer severe pain when she's in human form and have an insatiable bloodlust whenever she turns into cheetah. And finally, in at number 1, it's Armless Tiger Man. If any of you know me, then you know Gustav Hertz was going to make this list. Gustav worked in a mechanical laboratory in Munich, Germany during the 1940s, but unfortunately for Hertz, one day his arms got caught in a machine and had to be amputated. While this is a horrible thing to happen to anyone, Gustav did survive the experience, and he was later given reading material on how to operate day to day without arms, instead using his mouth and feet to complete daily tasks. Turns out that he was really good at this. Hertz developed ridiculous skill in using his teeth and feet. He even took things a couple steps further. He sharpened his teeth into fangs that he could use as weapons and tools, and he even developed above average levels of strength and dexterity in his jaw, legs, and toes, allowing him to bend steel with his mouth, kick really hard, and throw daggers with his toes. He ends up proving how capable he was as a World War II enemy of the hero Angel and an enemy of Wakanda, where he was completely destroyed by that era's Black Panther. I will talk about Armless Tiger Man whenever I have the chance, and I am not sorry about it.
Number 10, Bane. So Bane's a weird one because we do know his backstory. He grew up in prison and worked hard to strengthen his mind and body. Eventually, he was also injected with venom after rising a little too high on the prison totem. The prison officials decided to use him as a test subject. This transformed him and turned him into the beast we know him as today, aka Tom Hardy. Just kidding. But also, he is Tom Hardy, so not just kidding. So while we know who Bane is and know that he grew up in prison, either taking over for his father's sentence after his father escaped, cause yeah, apparently that's how prison works, or being born in prison and I guess just being forced to live there? The why behind how this all came about is still remarkably unclear. Did his family not have any relatives who could just take him in so he wouldn't have to live in prison? Why do prison sentences pass on to the next generation? Did his father know this and he just didn't care? What we know of his backstory just begets more questions. And he never is really given a birth name, just Bane. So his identity remains unknown because he was never really permitted to have one. He was truly born in the dark. Number 9, Mystique. You think you know who Mystique is, but odds are good none of us will ever truly know who she is. Or at least we won't know if we know, you know? Because of her remarkable shape-shifting abilities, it is impossible to know if the standard blue-skinned form we are used to seeing her in is her actual form or not. It is possible she may not even have been female at birth. Mystique often goes by the name Raven Darkholme, but no one even knows how truly old she is. We know she met her lifetime lover Irene Adler, Destiny, earlier in the 20th century, and that she met Logan around the same time as well, but we do not know anything of her life before that. It is possible that Mystique could be thousands of years old, could have been born with a completely different name than Raven, and could have even been born a man. Who knows? Not me. Number 8, Ruby Thursday. Unsurprisingly, Thursday Rubenstein's origins have yet to really be revealed in the comics. We know that she works for the Headmen and is a villain, but we were never really given much explanation as to why. Where a head should be, she has a plastic computer ball. Well, we know that Thursday chose to undergo this transformation in having a cyborg ball head. It's never really explained where she came from or what her motive is in this regard. Her backstory is sorely lacking when it comes to who she truly is and what her purpose is other than to be evil and give everyone a ball head. Yeah, she wants us to all have ball heads. The reason why this isn't too shocking though is her character appears to have been created as some kind of joke by Steve Gerber, Sal Buscemi, and Jim Mooney to see if they could create a sexy female character who didn't have a head. Based on the male character's reactions in the comic stories too, it would appear that they managed to succeed to do so. Everyone's always hitting on Ruby Thursday, which is, her character's so weird. Rate and weird. Number 7. Overdrive. Overdrive is kind of one of the most adorable, mysterious villains. We know some of Overdrive's past, but not truly who he is. Namely that he was a skilled motorist who very much wanted to become a superhero. He attempted to become a hero, but when that failed, ended up joining with Mr. Negative and turning to a life of crime. He is able to alter vehicles and some other forms of tech by using his nanobacteria. In other words, he can trick out a ride just by touching it. He has been thwarted by Spider-Man on many occasions, and one time accidentally revealed a bunch of his Spider-Man merch to the hero, and confessed that he was his biggest fan. He even begged police to keep the trademark note that Spider-Man had left behind with his restrained self, which read the standard, courtesy of your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. So cute. I want him to become like a good guy. I want him to like go from supervillain to like just not a great superhero. Be like a terrible sidekick for Spider-Man. Be so cute. Worse than Frogman. Number 6. The Orb. This villain was apparently just born that way. The Orb is famous for simply having an eyeball for a head. He's got a similar vibe to Ruby Thursday, except that she was a scientist who made herself the way she is, and he was just kind of born deformed. And by deformed, I mean he was born with a giant eyeball as a head. He grew up in a freak show after being abandoned by his parents. Sad. As such, his true identity before his life as the Orb remains unknown. I don't even know if the Orb knows who he really is. He's just always been the Orb. Number 5. The Skeleton. The Skeleton was a villain whose story was really short-lived. They were created by Brian K. Vaughan and Marcos Martin, and first appeared in Batman Gotham City Secret Files and Origins issue number 1. Appropriate. They had the ability to transform themselves into any villain, even appearing able to think and move like them, perfectly disguised. I say they because even the gender of the Skeleton was never confirmed. All we knew was that they were plotting to take revenge on Bruce Wayne, who they had known for a long time and apparently felt slighted by. However, the Skeleton's story got lost in the shuffle, and we never got to find out more about the villain in terms of who they actually were or what they were planning for Bruce. Bring the Skeleton back. There are questions, and I need to know what happens. Number 4. Automatopoeia. Truly a villain I wish we saw more of in the comics. Automatopoeia was originally a Green Arrow villain who was created by Kevin Smith and Phil Hester. He gets his name from the fact that he only speaks in onomatopoeias, words that represent sounds. Snap, buzz, sizzle, squelch. You get the idea. He has also gone up against Batman only to be defeated, but managed to escape the Bat by stabbing Joker in the heart, forcing him to choose between saving the Joker's life or catching onomatopoeia. Batman, being Batman, of course chose to save the Joker, allowing onomatopoeia to escape. Later the villain resurfaced as the vigilante Baphomet, and we appeared to learn much about his personal life, but it turned out that his vigilante persona was all a ruse. He had used the persona to get closer to Batman, only to betray Bruce and kill his lover at the time, Silver St. Cloud. Who knows if what we learned of the villain was actually part of the ruse or not? Was it true? Was it a lie? It was probably a lie. Also, what a twist. Ka-clack. By the way, I'm the villain that got away. Number 3. The Foreigner. Despite existing since the 1980s, there's very little we know about the Foreigner. He is a Spider-Man villain who once wanted to recruit Spider-Man as an assassin for the 1400 Club. However, this didn't end up working out. He even worked with Black Cat behind Spider-Man's back in an attempt to do this. Though Black Cat was not fully privy to his plans, she just thought they were working to defeat Spider-Man. So for anyone who doesn't think Black Cat has ever been villainous, this plot definitely did not make her look super heroic. She also, I think, cheated on Spider-Man with the Foreigner. No, that didn't happen, but she had a relationship with the Foreigner. Anyways, despite knowing that the Foreigner was also formerly married to the Silver Sable, we still have yet to find out his true name or much else about him. We just know he slept with the Silver Sable, he was married to the Silver Sable, he was with Black Cat, he's a bad dude. Number 2. Kindred. At first this character seemed like they might be some kind of dark ally, but no longer. Kindred is a demonic spirit that was once a human soul, someone who knew Norman Osborn and Peter Parker well. He refers to Spider-Man affectionately as Pete, and helped Peter to watch over MJ and protect her while Spider-Man was stuck in a fight. However, it is then later revealed that Kindred is really looking to get revenge on Peter, dun dun dun, and afterwards also get revenge on Norman Osborn, dun dun dun, who also tortured the spirit in life as both Norman Osborn and Green Goblin. Who will Kindred be? Tell me the secrets. While many have theories as to who the spirit could belong to, the comics have yet to confirm whether any of our speculations are true. So you gotta wait to find out. Read more. Hopefully we get to find out and it doesn't just disappear. Number 1. The Joker. Seems like anything we find out about the true identity of the Joker just leads to more mystery. The Joker has probably had more origin stories than any comic book villain, potentially any comic book character except for Power Girl, and has remarked before that if he must have one, he prefers it be multiple choice. Both his name and backstory have yet to be pinned down, and recent information that Batman received has only led comic book readers and Batman himself to have even more questions. What is going on here? Batman asks the Mobius chair about the Joker's identity, and is told about 3 Jokers, leading to even more intrigue when it comes to the Joker's true identity, and throwing all of us fans a curveball. We were not expecting that in issue 50 of the 2011 Justice League series, let me tell you. I was like, we're gonna get answers? Nope. You know when Batman's like impossible, that it's like, what's happening?
Villains can be complicated, ever-changing, and a little bit wacky. The same can be said about the stories of how they turned evil in the first place. A number of villains were created specifically for the 1966 Batman show, Egghead being one of them. He is an egotistical, egg-obsessed man whose brain is too big for his head, which is why it's so long. This man is pretty exceptional. He was a professor at Gotham Academy. He eventually turned to a life of crime, working with the likes of the Riddler. It's unclear why he stepped into villainhood. Maybe one day he just cracked. During his villain activities, he met a woman and fell in love, but she didn't want to marry until Egghead was better off financially, so he hatched a plan to take over the city. This did not go over easy for him, and he was foiled by Batman. He later tried to hatch a dinosaur, which Batman did not omelet that slide and defeated him again. He's gone from the screen to the page to the big screen in various cameos. Egghead is one of the only villains to figure out that Bruce Wayne is Batman. Due to the enormous expense of the heroes, he used clues about Batman's mannerisms to make the connection. One of my personal irrational fears is that my atoms and whatever I'm currently touching's atoms will line up perfectly and I will be painfully fused into whatever that thing is. In our world, I know that's not scientifically possible, but in the Marvel Universe, it seems to be. Maybe. In Spidey's Super Stories 8, Spider-Man encounters a man fused with a wall, making him the Wall. He was a regular kid until an accident at work permanently altered his being. The accident being an entire brick wall coming crashing down on him. It's not really explained how he fuses with the bricks, but the only semi-plausible reason I can think of is their atoms lining up, which hopefully they'll line up again and he can be freed. We only see him in Spidey stories, but he was based on a character created for the Electric Company TV show. The Spidey Super Stories and the show went hand in hand. The show was designed to entice kids to practice speech and writing, as were the Spidey comics. Marvel provided Spidey to the channel for free, and he wasn't the only big name there. Morgan Freeman and Rita Moreno starred as well. As for the Wall, we don't see him again until a profile on the Marvel Strike Force website goes up. Batman's valet, Alfred, is a saint and deserves nothing but good things, so why did the creators of Detective Comics feel the need to crush him with a boulder, have his body kidnapped and experimented on, and brought back to life Frankenstein style, turning him into a villain wanting to kill his family? I don't get it. After the experiments are done on his near-dead body, his mind and body have been twisted into reverse, so all the love he felt for Batman and Robin is now hatred for Batman and Robin. The Outsider is a physically separate being from Alfred. Alfred is stuck in a coma-like state. In the final battle between the Outsider and Robin, Batman figures out how to get Alfred back to normal. The unfortunate part is that the Outsider is still inside Alfred and every once in a while comes out again. Marvel creates some interesting characters, like an elf hitman. His name is Melf, M-E-L-F, but his alias is Elf with a Gun, and that's it, that's what he is. It seems that he's part of a bigger group, Elves with Guns. We don't know where he's from officially, but the Elves with Guns are agents for the Tribunals, a force dedicated to preserving order in the universe. Melf was a weird guy. He would go around offing random people and he was never caught. He was only stopped because he was run over by a truck. His nephew Ralph then took up his undisclosed mission. However, if we look at him like he was working for the Tribunals, then maybe his victims weren't as random. This would be a great and easy to follow explanation for everything, which is why it has been disproven. Turns out the Tribunals were fake, and we are once again back to wondering why a killer elf was roaming the streets. The Phantom Stranger has led a lot of lives, literally. One might be canon now, but it's only a matter of time before someone else grabs the pen and messes with his history. His current origin in the New 52 story is that he was Judas, betrayer of Jesus, and that makes him one of the greatest sinners that has ever lived. Another is that he was a fallen angel who didn't pick a side during the Heavenly War. Another is that he was Isaac from the Bible story. Not exactly the same though. This time his son died because King Herod was looking for Jesus, and now Isaac hates Jesus and later tore him. Another is that he was spared during biblical times but didn't want to be, but the angels didn't want to let him in heaven, so he has to walk the earth alone forever. And the fourth is that he was actually one of the last remaining parts of our previous universe. At the final curtain, he approaches those studying the end and passes a part of himself onto a new person, so when the universe is reborn, they get a Phantom Stranger too. In addition to his many backstories, it is also up in the air as to whether or not he is a villain. To me, I think he started out as a villain. He did betray Jesus in at least a few of these, but later realized the error of his ways and became a sort of hero. Lots of people just choose to ignore many New 52 storylines, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see what sticks for Phantom. Phantom Stranger is now connected to a villain called Question, but that wasn't always the case. Question at one point was a character that was thought to be a supernatural power, thought to be because it was never made clear. One of the only things that is now considered canon about him is that he has committed a crime bad enough to be considered one of 3 of the world's greatest sinners, part of the trio of sin with Phantom. We never know this guy's name. Before being turned into Question, the guy was obsessed with power and having his name feared by all. As his punishment, he got his face taken away and he can no longer remember himself or his name. This was introduced in the New 52. Before that, he was just an alter ego of Vic Sage, but then Flashpoint caused them to separate and even have a brand new different history thing going on. This version of him isn't that bad, he just really wants to know who he is. He also shares a name with a Taylor Swift song. It's all very confusing. I am hoping that we will eventually get a name reveal out of him, whether he's another universe version of an existing Marvel villain, or if he's really a historical figure. Identity theft and retcons have led to quite a confusing backstory for Zorn. Zorn's debut was in New X-Men Annual 2001, and at the end, he was revealed to be Magneto in disguise. Only he wasn't. Later it was revealed that it was actually Zorn pretending to be Magneto pretending to be Zorn, and Zorn was being controlled by someone named Sublime to foster mutant hatred in the world. Easy to follow. At the end of the Magneto identity theft fight, Zorn dies, but not really. His body is done for, but his essence was still around through his connection to Sublime, so he came back. The creator of Zorn in 2001 always intended for Zorn to be Magneto, actually Magneto, so when you read the story, there are hints to it the whole way through. It was because the editors liked Zorn's character, and Marvel wanted Magneto alive so they could use him again, that the confusing aspect of his story was born. Zorn also has a twin brother with very similar powers to him, so sometimes Zorn returns, but it's Zorn 1, or it's not Zorn 1, and it's actually Zorn 2. It's a whole thing. Duella Dent's origin is confusing because she wants it to be. She is a pathological liar when it comes to her family tree. She is claimed to be the daughter of the Joker, Catwoman, the Riddler, the Penguin, Scarecrow, and Two-Face, and even more. She was first introduced as the Joker's daughter, but her last name is Dent, the same name belonging to Harvey Dent, or Two-Face. So now she is known as Two-Face's daughter for a while, until Robin figures out she's not the right age to be his daughter. She agrees and then just disappears. She appeared in the Teen Titans comic series, and she was planned to be revealed as a time traveler that gets reality warped one too many times and is driven insane. Unfortunately, we never got to see this as the comics were cancelled. Technically, Duella doesn't want to be a villain, but she does fight a lot of heroes and lies all the time. She was later revealed to actually legit be the daughter of another universe Joker and Three-Face, a female variation of Two-Face. Is this a lie? Maybe. You can literally never know what's real in these universes anymore. Turns out, neither can Duella. It's suggested that because her mind was warped so much, every time she switched Earths, her consciousness switches slightly as well, which is why she's named so many different parents. She was just confused. The Joker is one of the most iconic villains of all time, so it's no wonder so many people want to leave their mark on his story. Unfortunately, that makes for a pretty messed up, twisted, confusing history. One thing is common: he ends up in acid and comes out looking like that. Who he was before, and even during the swim, is up to whoever is holding the pen. In 1951's Detective Comics 168, the Joker had been the Red Hood, also a criminal, and one night he decided to rob a factory. He escaped by swimming through the pool of chemical wastes, and I genuinely think he thought he would come out normal. He didn't, and to his delight figured out his new look was scary and used it to his advantage. In later versions, like The Killing Joke in 1988, he is a failing comedian and once again finds himself in the chemical factory, but but this time he gets scared into the acid. In Batman the Animated Series, he was a hitman first. In the very recent and Oscar-worthy interpretation from Joaquin Phoenix is that he didn't fall in the acid yet, his look is just makeup and he has a neurological disorder that makes him randomly laugh. There is another movie coming out with Lady Gaga as Harley, so maybe the acid will make an appearance then too. Time for the big guy, the MCU's newest big bad wolf and my never-ending headache, Kang the Conqueror. One thing seems to generally stay consistent: every version of Kang starts out as Nathaniel Richards. Where Nathaniel comes from? We have options. There was a Nathaniel from Earth 616 that brought peace to Earth 6311 when he traveled there. This made him a big deal. He was known as the legendary benefactor. But he wasn't the Nathaniel native to the planet, so another Nathaniel was eventually born. This Nathaniel was maybe descended from the great benefactor himself, or Dr. Doom. This Nathaniel's history was messed up by another him, causing him to be a good guy for a while. Nathaniel grows up and is bored, so he travels back in time to Earth 616's ancient Egypt. His plans? Be king. Eventually he tries to return home after losing some fights, but is caught in a time storm and transported ahead to the 40th century Earth 6311. The future is a mess, they are at war again, and the people have regressed into barbarians. Nathaniel has found the perfect group to take over. This is the first time he takes on the name Kang the Conqueror. He took his name and ran, conquering Earth 6311, that galaxy, and then trying to attack Earth 616. He wanted more power, but there was also a historical record that said that eventually a celestial Madonna was going to give birth to the most powerful entity ever, and Kang wanted to be their dad. This was the confusing origin of one version of Kang, but generally considered to be the base Kang, kind of. There are so many versions of him under a variety of names: Nathaniel, Kang, Immortus, Scarlet Centurion, Victor Timely, Mr. Griffin, Prime Kang, and Kang the Conglomerator.
Number 10. Doctor Strange. Dr. Stephen Strange was an accomplished and world-renowned surgeon until a tragic car accident. While he survived the crash, the nerves in his hands were severely damaged, making it impossible for him to recover well enough to return to his work as a neurosurgeon. Strange was egotistical to the point that he refused to do any other work in the medical community, attempting to use all of his funds to try and find a cure for his hands, and eventually sinking into a deep depression and alcohol addiction. Previous to his accident, it was his parents' death and the fact that he found great success early on that caused him to become materialistic in his pursuits, caring less and less for his patients and more about the acclaim and the money that he was making. Eventually, he heard of the mystical power of the Ancient One and used his last bit of money to set out to see if they might possess healing abilities strong enough to heal him. From there, he would become a reluctant, stubborn, and eventually extremely loyal and determined student, and would go on to become the new Sorcerer Supreme and magical hero known as Doctor Strange. Number 9. Iron Man. Tony Stark has led quite the privileged life, basically being born with a silver spoon in his mouth, so you might think he's got it made when it comes to superhero origins. But let's not forget what it took to get him to build and operate his Iron Man suit, and what inspired him to become a hero. Tony Stark was giving a demonstration of his technology to the military when there was an explosion. Stark was injured and taken prisoner by a terrorist who wanted to use his brilliant mind to have him create weapons for them. Shrapnel lodged into Tony Stark's chest moved ever closer to his heart, and it was the help of another brilliant prisoner, Nobel Prize winner, and physicist Ho Yinsen, whom Stark admired, that allowed Tony to survive and inspired him to build the Iron Man Mark I armor, which allowed him to escape, but at the cost of Yinsen's life, and put him on the path to becoming a hero. Number 8. Rocket Raccoon. Rocket Raccoon in the Marvel Cinematic Universe alludes to his character's dark origins when he gets into an argument with the other Guardians of the Galaxy, insisting they consider him to be a joke, and revealing that there is a lifetime of pain in his past which gives him the form and personality that he has today, as a being who was heavily experimented on, being torn apart and put back together more times than he can count. Previous to this origins though, in the comics, Rocket was simply one of a group of animals given heightened intelligence and awareness by robotic beings, who sought to escape their duties of looking after mental patients in their care. Rocket was one of the animals who stepped in to take on these duties. Later on, however, even in the comics, while out exploring space, he would be abducted and taken to a place known as Lab World, where he was then studied and experimented on. Number 7. Two-Face. Harvey Dent went from being on the side of the law and one of the biggest real-life everyday fighters for justice in Gotham to becoming one of the city's most iconic villains. It all started when he was disfigured. During a trial, crime boss Sal Maroni threw acid in Dent's face, scarring him for life and driving him insane. Dent lost his faith in justice justice as a result of this incident and instead left it up to fate to decide whether he would behave heroically or criminally, often known for flipping a coin to decide his victim's fate. Number 6. Spider-Man. Spider-Man's whole brooding and moody sensibility and his battle with depression, which would only grow over time, all stems back to his origins. The death and loss of Uncle Ben is what inspired Spider-Man to become a hero and also gives him a lifetime of weighty regrets. Uncle Ben's death could have been avoided in Spider-Man's mind if only he'd cared enough to use his powers to stop a thief in his path, who would shortly after end Ben's life. To Peter Parker, he may as well have pulled the trigger himself. This tragic and dark story would inspire the hero to use his powers more responsibly, but would also haunt him for the rest of his life. Number 5. Dr. Manhattan. John Osterman's origin story as Dr. Manhattan is truly horrific. John found himself trapped inside a test chamber when he went to retrieve his watch, as it underwent a scheduled experiment. The experiment caused John to be taken apart at an atomic level, removing his intrinsic field, which is a term used in Watchmen to describe what holds atoms together, the force that does that. It's not actually a true scientific term, fun fact. As such, he was granted powers over the intrinsic fields of all things, using his powers to build himself a body 3 months later and physically manifesting in the cafeteria of his workplace. John's life would be forever changed, and in becoming a god, he would not only look different, but would also become less human as the years went on, experiencing a detached feeling from life on Earth. Number 4. Batman. Bruce Wayne was just a young boy when he lost his parents. They were both killed point blank in front of him one night after the family had left the movie theater where they just watched Zorro, and attempted to take a shortcut down an alley. A thief named Joe Chill killed them during a robbery, leaving Bruce alone in the world, save for the family butler, Alfred, who would become like a father to him. It was this tragic start to his life that caused young Bruce to grow up fast and run in with a bat that inspired him to become the Dark Knight of Gotham, known as Batman. It's also been argued countless times over that this traumatic event made young Bruce unstable, which is perhaps why he has turned to a life of vigilantism, unable to heal the mental wounds his parents' tragic deaths caused. Number 3. Gamora. Gamora is the last surviving member of her race, known as the Zen Huberis. They were a peaceful people who were all killed by a religious order when they resisted their attempt at dominance in the galaxy. Thanos managed to save Gamora and raised her as his daughter, turning her into his own weapon, modifying her with tech to grant her superhuman abilities. He planned on using her to defeat the villain known as Magus, who was also Thanos' enemy. While Thanos seemed to occasionally show Gamora fatherly affection, there would come a time when she would turn on him, acknowledging him as someone who had used her for his own means and denouncing her allegiance to him, seeing him for what he was, a mad tyrant and a villain who was selfish and cold-hearted, seeking only to bring death to whatever planet, galaxy, or universe he was in. Number 2. Raven. If we go back to the original New Earth continuity, Raven's origins are pretty freaking dark. Her mother was part of a cult, and when she tried to escape and leave, the members prevented her from doing so by summoning a powerful demon named Trigon. This demon then forcefully mated with her. From this, Raven was conceived. She was born Angela Roth and raised to control her emotions, to help prevent her from losing control of her demonic powers and to basically prevent her from giving in to the dark side. She was sort of like a Jedi, but with a demonic heritage. When she learned of Trigon's evil plans, she attempted to stop him and sought help from the Justice League, who actually refused to help her because of her demonic heritage, prompting Raven to work harder to become a hero and putting her on a path to become one of the Teen Titans. Number 1. Spawn. Spawn was originally Albert Al Simmons, an assassin who was murdered by his friend while on a mission. He then is condemned to a life in hell, but makes a bargain to return to the land of the living so that he can see his wife one last time. However, he must agree to become a Hellspawn in order to do so. The unfortunate side effect of which, that he doesn't learn until later, is that he will forget his memories somewhat, so he returns to life, but only as a faint recollection of his past. And what's more, his body is still kinda undead, making him appear as a horrific monster. So even if he had remembered his wife's name straight away, he would not be able to reveal himself to her. When he finally does remember his wife, he discovers she is remarried to one of his friends, and they now have a daughter. He also realizes that 5 years have passed since his death. Not what he had originally expected when he made that bargain. Spawn, lost in the world, is now forced to search for a new purpose while also conserving his powers, as once they're fully used up, he will return to hell. Thank you so much for watching, Nerd Squad. What characters do you feel have the darkest origins? How do you feel about superheroes with particularly dark or traumatic pasts? Do you prefer when a hero or villain has a less dramatic or intense backstory?
At number 10 is Calendar Man. So you think you've heard all the villain origin stories, huh? Well, have you ever met Julian Day, the Calendar Man? This guy's obsession with time and dates would make even the most punctual person seem laid back. He'd celebrate holidays like nobody's business, but his calendar fixation led to some serious mental unraveling. You see, he dabbled in a life of crime with a unique twist, pulling off heists tied to specific calendar dates. Batman, being the Caped Crusader he is, couldn't resist, and the two engaged in an ongoing dance of cat and mouse. But here's the twist: after some stints in Arkham Asylum, Julian somehow became a useful asset to Batman. He helped him crack the case of the Holiday Unaliver, a case that the Calendar Man himself was initially the prime suspect for. Nowadays, Julian's obsession has evolved into metahuman abilities, as he ages and regenerates with the seasons. Winter brings wrinkles, and spring, well, it's like a youth serum, turning him into a newer, younger version of himself. Just goes to show even the weirdest obsessions can lead to some unexpected supervillain stories. At number 9 is Ice Cream. So if you haven't heard of him, Ice Cream is a minor villain who only appeared in the Obnoxio the Clown #1 X-Men comic. Ice Cream is a mutant supervillain with the power to turn his entire body into any flavor of ice cream. That's right. In his ice cream form, he can change his shape, melting into a puddle to slip under a door. His costume is made of unstable molecules, so it can turn into ice cream along with him and then change back. His origin story is that people laughed at him because of his ridiculous powers, and he blamed the X-Men because their incredible powers made his look ridiculous in comparison. So he made a plan to destroy them so that everyone would respect him. He also made ice cream puns like lickety banana split and easy as pie a la mode, and at one point he even said curses like a typical cartoon villain. If you're enjoying the video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. At number 8 is the Rainbow Rider. Roy G. Bivolo, aka the Rainbow Rider, is not your typical comic book villain. Growing up, Roy had dreams of becoming a famous artist, but there's a catch. He was colorblind. While other kids were out playing, Roy spent his time perfecting his craft, only to be met with disdain for his art due to his inability to see the true beauty of colors. But Roy's story takes an even darker turn. His father, an optometrist and optical tech expert, vowed to find a way to cure his son's condition. Tragically, he passed away before he could fulfill that promise. But before he could, Roy's father handed him a pair of goggles that he had been developing. These goggles had the power to emit solid rainbow-colored light beams, which kind of misses the target a little bit. Fueled by bitterness over his failed artistic pursuits and his father's unfulfilled promise, Roy chose a different path. He embarked on a life of crime, using the goggles to create chaos and establish himself as the Rainbow Raider. At number 7 is Shaggy Man. No, it's not Shaggy from Scooby-Doo, although I wish it was. This guy was actually a freaky creation of Dr. Andrew Zagarian, who was just trying to find a substitute for lost human tissue. He whipped up something called plast alloy and decided to beef it up with a dash of salamander DNA. But here's where everything goes south for science. A big old human error occurred, and this artificial body he was working on turned into a hulking hairy giant he cleverly named the Shaggy Man. No PhD required to see where this is going. The Shaggy Man goes bonkers, attacking anything that moves. Plus, it can regrow any body part that it loses thanks to its salamander DNA. The Doctor was in way over his head and had to call in the Justice League for backup. But even then, those superheroes couldn't handle this monstrosity. But leave it to the Flash to come up with a genius solution. He tells the Doctor to create another Shaggy Man, and then they toss these immortal beasts into a deep pit where they're stuck battling each other for all eternity. At number 6 is Victoria Murdoch. The villainess known as the Asbestos Lady had a burning grudge against the original Human Torch. To face the fiery hero, she decided to deck herself out in a fireproof asbestos suit, making her nearly invincible to the Human Torch. But she craved more power and tried to strong-arm her scientist friend, Fred Raymond into enhancing her asbestos abilities. The Torch kept a close eye on Raymond's home and thwarted her plans. Fueled by revenge, the asbestos lady caused a train wreck to off the Raymonds, but their son Thomas survived unscathed. She tracked his fire-resistant talents as he joined a circus act, but again, the Torch foiled her plans by melting her boots to the road. Then in 1947, her twin brother Murdoch met his end at the hands of the Torch and Toro. Asbestos Lady resolved to wipe them out, as she lured them into traps, inducing an asbestos-lined net, but they survived. But despite her escape attempts and alliances with villains, the Asbestos Lady ended up behind bars, vowing vengeance. However, she eventually succumbed to mesothelioma, probably due to all that asbestos exposure. At number 5 is Fred Myers, the Boomerang Man. Have you ever heard of a villain who started off as a pro baseball player? No? Well, let me introduce you to Boomerang, aka Fred Myers. He's not your typical bad guy. You see, back in the day, he was swinging for the fences in the baseball world. But then he got suspended for taking bribes. That's right, he went from hitting home runs to hitting people. But wait, it gets crazier. A criminal organization came knocking on his door and Fred joined the dark side as an assassin. He worked for some big names like Justin Hammer, the Kingpin, the Masters of Evil, and even the Sinister 12. Then he had a brief stint as a hero during the Marvel Universe Civil War, going by the name Outback. But of course he couldn't resist the allure of the criminal life for long. Now he's a part of the Thunderbolts, a team of reformed supervillains. Boomerang's not just any run-of-the-mill bad guy either. He's a sharpshooter with a lethal arsenal of customized boomerangs, from explosives to tear gas. So the next time you see a baseball game, remember that not all athletes stick to playing fair. At number 4 is Leapfrog. An unusual and relatively obscure villain in the Marvel Universe, offers not one but two intriguing origin stories. First, we have Vincent Petilio, a struggling inventor who decided to take matters into his own hands. Frustrated with his lack of success, he crafted a frog-like suit equipped with electric leaping coils. Sadly for him, Daredevil foiled his criminal aspirations not once but twice, and later Iron Man joined the party, ensuring Petilio's stint in jail. Fast forward to post-prison life, where financial hardship followed the tragic loss of Petilio's wife to cancer. His son Eugene took up the mantle as Frogman, causing some father-son superhero drama. But then when the villainous White Rabbit resurfaced, Petilio went undercover to help the police, leading to a unique family showdown against the White Rabbit. Next, let's talk about Buford Lang, a bad dad who stumbled into a leapfrog costume. His encounter with Daredevil at a rooftop took a shocking twist involving his own son Timmy, who didn't want to see Daredevil hurt. This electrifying turn of events led to Lang's unfortunate demise until he was eventually resurrected, of course. This is comic books. At number 3, meet the Sultan of Sauce, the Condiment King. If you've seen the Lego Batman movie or the Harley Quinn animated series, you've encountered this master of salvary savagery. In the Lego movie spin-off, he joined the Joker's gang attacking Gotham, and in Harley Quinn, he's Poison Ivy's Kite Man rival. Yep, the Condiment King is a real DC villain, though he's not exactly keeping Batman up at night. Batman the Animated Series introduced him where he fell under Joker's control, who made him wield condiments as weapons. Before his spicy turn, he was Buddy Sandler, a comedian brainwashed by the Joker to threaten people with ketchup and mustard at a fancy restaurant. In the comics, his real name was Michelle Mayo, a name that doesn't exactly command respect. But in Birds of Prey number 37, he concocted a poison that sent Blue Beetle, Black Canary, and Robin into anaphylactic shock. Deliciously evil, am I right? At number 2, Clock King's comic history is a curious tale of obscurity turned cool. See, back in the 1960s, he made his debut in the world's finest comics number 111, a crook who really loved clocks. And well, that's about it. Over the next 2 decades, he only popped up a couple more times in some of the world's finest backup stories. One of those tried to give him a backup story, but it was really only a half-hearted attempt at best. However, the 1980s came to the rescue with the creation of the Injustice Gang. This group of largely forgotten villains, formed for laughs in the Justice League comics, breathed new life into characters like Clock King. But the real turning point for him was Batman the Animated Series. See, they took this obscure clock-loving crook and turned him into something awesome. The updated designs and new motivations struck a chord with fans, and suddenly, the Clock King was vogue. At number 1 is Polka Dot Man. His mom was a scientist obsessed with superheroes, and she decided to take a leap into the unknown. See, she she worked at Star Labs, and in her quest to turn her kids into caped crusaders, she exposed Abner to an interdimensional virus. Now what happened next is something like out of a horror sci-fi flick. See, Abner's skin starts sprouting these weird glowing polka dots and lumps, and it's not a fashion statement. Some of his siblings, they didn't make it. They paid the price for their mom's experiments, but Abner, well, he survived, but at a cost. He had to expel those polka dots twice daily just to prevent the virus from munching on his insides. Now what's more is because of his mom's twisted experiments, Abner got PTSD. He sees his mom's face in every person he looks at, like an unending horror show in his head. And while he might not be too fond of unaliving people, he's got a twisted way to motivate himself. See, he imagines his targets as his own mother. Eventually he ended up behind bars in Belle Reve Penitentiary, but he would eventually go on to be recruited by Amanda Waller as part of a new squad, and I'm sure you all know the rest. At number 10 we have Apocalypse. One of Earth's very first mutants, this immortal threat blurs the line between man and deity. Originally called En-Sabah-Nur, which translates either to the morning light or the seven lights, he was born in ancient Egypt, and after being abandoned by his tribe at birth on account of his monstrous physique, he was found and raised by a ruthless nomadic warrior tribe where he learned the principle that would guide him for the rest of eternity: that only the toughest, most ruthless and pitiless few would and should survive. And thanks to his mutant immortality, which comes from his ability to alter his own molecular structure at will, Nur was able to integrate his body with celestial technology over the eons, which basically uncaps his power level by allowing him to spontaneously bestow upon himself any superpower of his choosing whenever he wants, thus cementing Apocalypse as one of the most powerful ancient villains in comic history. And by the way, if you're digging the video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. If you haven't done those things already, I'd really appreciate it if you did, because it helps me out. Thanks guys. At number 9 we have Circe the Weaver. Immortal witch and longtime enemy of the Amazons of Paradise Island, Circe is probably best known mythologically speaking as she who transforms people into animal hybrids, which she calls her Ani-Men. Though she sports a wide variety of many other magical abilities, the lot of which we won't be getting into today as they're all pretty typical for magic wielders. But I will mention her chronokinetic ability, allowing her to freeze temporal reality and pull herself and others out of the moment, a supremely useful and powerful ability. Alright, so how does one go about acquiring mastery over this awesome magic? Gods, naturally. See, Circe was once the princess of Colus, and after being wedded off to the heir of one of the wealthiest kingdoms in the land, she discovered that the dude was a brute, a drunk, and a liar. Arranged marriages, am I right? Anyways, she eventually capped him, which led to her being hunted by the dude's family until one day, lost and in exile, she was approached by the goddess Hecate, which bestowed upon her the Circle of the Witch Mark, representing 1/5 of Hecate's immortal soul, thus granting Circe mastery of magic by which she could fulfill her desires of dominance and revenge, and so began the legend of Circe the Weaver. At number 8 we have Kulan Gath. The sorcerer who would become Kulan Gath was once a young slave purchased by the original Kulan Gath, who was a sorcerer from the cruel kingdom of Stygia during the Hyborian era. Eventually, after withstanding years of abuse from his master, the boy ended up believing that Kulan intended to slay him, and so he decided to act first, if you catch my drift, by poisoning the mage and feeding his body to the pigs. The boy then took possession of the fallen sorcerer's magic library, and after mastering the magic, he went on to make the Kulan Gath name infamous for centuries to come. The mage would then go on to gruesomely defeat Murky Ra, the sorcerer supreme of his time, so you know we're dealing with some powerful magic here. Kulan's been slain and revived almost too many times to count, thus enabling him to persist across millennia. At number 7 we have Hela. As the Asgardian goddess of the unalived, and with strength considerably greater than most Asgardians and even matching that of Thor, Hela is undeniably one of the most dangerous ancient villains on this list. Fans of the MCU's Ragnarok will recognize her as Odin's daughter, but the comics actually allude to her being the daughter of Loki, Asgardian god of mischief. And even though the Nords warned Odin that Hela would prove to be a great threat to Asgard, Odin decides to make Hela goddess and ruler of the spirits of the unalive, as if that's gonna help him somehow. As Hela grew, she longed to bring more Asgardian souls under her control, especially that of Odin and Thor, and so she and her father Loki attempted to bring Ragnarok by eliminating Baldur and then attacking Asgard with a horde of monsters. That is, until their plan was thwarted by Odin after he used his power to revive Baldur. Guess that's why she decided to take out Odin first in the movie. At number 6 we have Mephisto. The origin story behind this primordial demon has been lost to time, as he's certainly older than any mortal who's ever existed. He's essentially every demon stereotype rolled into one, as he's the ruler of his own infernal dimension and often tries to get people to make soul bargains. As a matter of fact, it's thanks to these very deals that were given characters like Ghost Rider, the crew of the Flying Dutchman. Heck, he even directly instructed or inspired the wraths of terror brought on by the likes of Apocalypse and even Thanos. Marvel goes so far as to claim that it was Mephisto who disguised himself as a snake to get Adam and Eve kicked out of the Garden of Eden. So remember kids, if a demon is offering you a deal that sounds too good to be true, it's cause it is. But hey, at least you're usually getting something of equal value back for your soul. I've seen more treacherous contracts from cell phone providers. At number 5, we have Necron. You ever hear of the philosophical darkness that preceded the light? Well, his name is Necron, and he's the leader of the Black Lantern Corps and the Lord of the Unliving. And that wasn't even a monetization-friendly self-censor either. That's the actual title of the land that he rules over, where the souls of the unalive await passage to their final residence, like a sort of purgatory. And it's from these unliving souls that Necron draws his power. He first became a threat to Earth after becoming aware of a reality's existence when an interdimensional rift is accidentally opened between the two dimensions after a paradox occurs in which an immortal being was banished to the realm of the dead, the unalive, YouTube. Anyhow, desiring the world that he was now able to see but being too large to pass through the rift, Necron imbues that aforementioned immortal with enormous power and sends him to go terminate the Guardians of the Universe in an attempt to increase the size of the rift. And that immortal, whose name I don't want to give away because he may or may not be the top spot on this list, does his part and sends several Guardians and Green Lanterns to go see Necron, if you catch my drift. That is until Hal Jordan managed to enter Necron's realm, inciting the spirits of the recently defeated Lanterns to rebel against Necron, distracting him long enough for the Lanterns on the other side to seal up the rift, albeit with Hal trapped inside. Poor guy. At number 4 we have Shuma-Gorath. Now you may recognize him as the dimension-hopping Gargantos from Multiverse of Madness, but make no mistake, that one-eyed monster in the movie is modeled after Shuma-Gorath. They just couldn't use the name in the film because of legal reasons, because everyone knows how much lawyers love to ruin everything we love for the money. Oh, I'm sorry. You want to call this fictional one-eyed tentacle monster a particular name? To the courts! Jokes aside, Shuma owes his apparent ancientness to the fact that he belongs to a group of cosmic nightmares called the Old Ones, so he's not exactly trying to hide it. After conquering and ruling over hundreds of dimensions, Shuma-Gorath and his gang of geriatrics came to the Marvel continuity realm on numerous occasions, the first of which being well over 1,000,000 years ago. Though on each visit he goes on conquering Earth, tyrannizing the people, and commanding human sacrifices and tribal wars. That is until he's inevitably banished by sorcerers or gods, at least temporarily. Shuma's never discouraged, however, because when you've lived through countless eternities, what's a few 100,000 years? At number 3 we have Ra's al Ghul, whose name by the way literally translates from Arabic as head of the demon. Just badass. The first mention of Ra's al Ghul in recorded history comes from the Crusades back in 1285. And if that's not ancient enough for you, too bad, deal with it, man. Even way back then, Ra's was so feared that the people of his time gave his name the Voldemort treatment, never so much as uttering his name, as he was rumored to be a creature unbound by even death itself, with the power to crush entire civilizations in the palm of his hand. Unbeknownst to the populace at the time, he owed much of his claim to fame to the League of Assassins, which he founded, who were so good at doing their job unnoticed that all of their nefarious accomplishments were accredited singularity to the Ghoul, or at least that's how it was in the beginning. Ra and his gang have been able to survive all these centuries thanks to bathing regularly in supernatural Lazarus pits, which grants Ghoul immorality, heals his injuries, even flushes out your pores. At number 2 we have Nathaniel Richards, otherwise known as Kang the Conqueror. You heard me right, ladies and gents. He who remains at the end of time is simultaneously one of the most ancient beings in the Marvel universe. How can that be, you ask? 2 words, my friend: time travel, or dimension hopping, depending on how you want to look at it. And for as simple as those 2 words are, they make for one of the most convoluted characters in comic book history, as there are innumerable iterations of the character spanning across countless eons. Like, for example, there are versions of Nathaniel who become Rama-Tut before becoming Kang, others who after becoming Kang become Rama-Tut again only to then become either Immortus or Scarlet Centurion and or back to Kang. Some flip back and forth between Rama-Tut and Kang before becoming Mr. Griffin, while other Kangs don't become Kang at all but instead become Iron Lad, and then from Iron Lad you get Kid Immortus, and then back to Kang. Yeah, it's messy. But the point here is that even though Nathaniel Richards was born in the furthest future, making him one of the youngest beings in the Marvel Universe, he is simultaneously one of the most ancient villains, as thanks to his time machine, he was able to instate himself as the pharaoh in ancient Egypt. At number 1 we have Krona. So if I'm gonna go and bend the rules on what qualifies as an ancient villain with Kang, there's no way I'm gonna leave out the guy whose time traveling shenanigans caused the very birth of evil itself. No kidding guys, time travel ain't a joke. Born amongst the race of beings responsible for the creation of the lantern rings, that being the Malthusians, Krona was a scientist who allowed his thirst for knowledge to corrupt his morality, creating experiments to the detriment of the entire cosmos. His forbidden experiments culminated in the time machine that would allow himself to witness the beginning of time itself, where, or should I say when, he was able to catch a glimpse of the hand of creation depositing the speck that would become the universe. But at that instant, his time machine exploded, fracturing the universe into infinite shatters that would become the multiverse, and simultaneously unleashing the primordial evil. This was the final straw that enabled the Malthusians to take action against Krona, converting him into a state of pure energy which was sent to circle the universe for all of eternity. But eventually it ended up in the dimension of the unalive, and thus introducing Necron to our reality. Gee, thanks! What a helpful chap. I mean, who wouldn't want not one, but two primordial evils adding more chaos and destruction to our already hectic lives? I mean, it's not like we were lacking in the villain department after your first screw up. Some people just never learn.
Number 10. Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn wasn't always a villain, but many things in his life shaped him to become the greedy, insane, and focused, iconic Spider-Man nemesis we know him as today. It all started when Norman was young. Hearing that his parents were having financial issues, he learned at a young age that it was important to look out for number one above all others to ensure his own survival. Number 1 is Norman Osborn, by the way. His father mistreated him and was known as a failure, and this drove young Norman to strive to do better than his old man, striving for excellence in all things at any cost. When his wife died, it only served to inspire Norman to throw himself into his work even more. He cut out his business partner and began searching for formulas that he could profit off of, ending up discovering and creating the Goblin Serum, which made him smarter and stronger, but at the cost of his sanity. Number 9. Harley Quinn. More of a psychological horror story as well. Harley Quinn ended up losing her sanity and parts of herself in her love of the Joker. It was her love for him that drove her to a life of crime and made her the villain initially that she became. She's now since found a way out of this darkness, dumped the Joker, and even moved more towards becoming a hero, even teaming up with Batman as his newest sidekick. But you can't deny how dark her origins were. In the limited series Harleen, we get a more sexy version of her fall into a life of crime and a fall into her love for the Joker. But even that shows just how much Harley spiraled down into the beautiful and freeing pit of insanity with Mr. J. It also tells us a tale of her being trapped in Arkham Asylum during a breakout with various villains around every corner, and not all of them are friendly towards Dr. Quinzel. In the end, she is forced to choose between the two sides of herself and ends up shattering into complete insanity after killing a security guard who she kind of considered to be her friend, turning away from her saner persona of Dr. Quinzel and fully becoming and embodying Harley Quinn. I just love too that the panel is like literally her shattering. Number 8. Prince Zuko. Okay, so while this might not be a comic book character, I still find Zuko of Avatar to have one of the most traumatic and horrifying stories out there, and I also just like Prince Zuko, so I want to talk about it. Not only that, but he's just a great villain because a lot of the reasoning behind who he is also helps to justify what he does and makes him a better villain because of that. And that makes him a better villain. A great villain in my mind needs to have a motivation that you can actually connect with. Their need to do something that goes against every moral code that they have learned or that society has to feel justified to the point that you may even feel bad for them at times or even find yourself rooting for them. After all, we aren't born villainous. It's usually a sense of injustice that makes us feel we have no other option but to break the rules, tear down the establishment, and question our own morals in order to get done what we need done. You have to be pushed to the brink to get to the point that you actually shift into a villain in reality, and Zuko definitely was that. A lot of what he does is out of wanting to win back his father's love, and because he is understandably afraid of his father as well. He became a villain as a result of his punishment at the hands of his father, where he was burned in a forced duel against him and then later exiled as well. Number 7. Carnage. Even before Cletus Cassidy was Carnage, he was terrifying, and the villain only has become more terrifying ever since then. Cletus was born into a family with a history of mental health problems, and from a young age it seemed as though there was always something off about him. It's like he was destined to become a villain. supervillain. He showed all the expectant signs of becoming a psychotic, sociopathic serial killer, and, well, that's just what happened. He was raised by a woman who we can only assume was his grandmother, as his mother died seemingly from childbirth. He was also born in Ravencroft, so I feel like that is some kind of foreboding as to what type of child he could grow up to be. His supposed grandmother mistreated him while raising him, and he paid her back in kind by pushing her down the stairs. Yikes! From there, he went to live with a family who is believed to have been his biological father and his stepmother, though I don't think that's ever really confirmed. That also didn't end well. Roscoe, his apparent dad, mistreated him as well, and his stepmother ended up dead, caught in the middle of the conflict. Roscoe was arrested because of her death, and Cletus ended up at an orphanage. While there, he unleashed his wrath on fellow orphans and administrators, even killing a few outright, and eventually burned the orphanage to the ground. Seriously, this is just something out of a horror movie. Number 6, The Broken. I don't know why, but this villain's tale just always sticks with me for some reason. No matter what, I just think it's that initial panel of Batman's like head and torso together, which is like separated from the rest of his body, but suspended with like thick coiled wires, and he's in immense pain, that really does it for me. It just is like, I don't know, I just think it's so scary. The Broken is an alternate version of Batman who comes from the dark multiverse. He appeared in the retelling of Nightfall, where instead of Batman winning the day on his Earth, he lost in the fight to reclaim Gotham against Azrael, who he'd appointed as his replacement after Bane broke his back. Azrael won and became Gotham's protector, Saint Batman, and Bruce became his permanent prisoner. His limbs were removed from his body, but he was kept alive, just as like a head and a torso, kept in immense pain on what I assume is like a life support machine, but also kind of a torture device. He suffered intense migraines and seizures while kept this way. Eventually, he was freed by Bane's son and escaped Saint Batman, taking back Gotham, but this entire experience left him broken, turning him into an even worse villain than Saint Batman was. So he like reclaims the city, but you're like, oh no, oh dear. Not good. Number 5, Superman. Wait a minute, what? Superman isn't a villain. Well, not in the main continuity, but in the alternate reality of Injustice, he most certainly is a villain. How did this come about? Well, after Superman was tricked into fighting Doomsday, only to realize he had been made to hallucinate by the Joker and Harley, who used fear toxin on him. What had actually been happening was that Superman had been fighting Lois Lane, not his nemesis Doomsday. He realizes this all too late, sadly, as he discovers he has killed Lois. Not only that, but she was pregnant. And not only that, but the Joker and Harley had also tied a trigger for a nuclear explosion to Lois's heart. As a result, when her heart stopped, Metropolis, Superman's shining city, was blown to bits. It's really no wonder he became such a cold and deadly villain. He felt that he needed to fix the world as a result of these events. Of course, he went about that in a way that I'm sure Lois would not have been proud of had she still been alive to see Superman fight in her and Metropolis's name. Number 4, Killer Frost. Killer Frost was originally scientist Caitlin Snow, who had been on the hunt for a perpetual motion energy conducting machine that many believed to be a myth. She sought to continue the research of Dr. Louise Lincoln, who had been working to make such a machine, which she called a self-sustaining thermodynamic ultraconductor engine. Caitlin's colleagues warned her against following in Dr. Lincoln's footsteps, but she paid them no mind. When she finished the engine, they turned on her, revealing their true colors. They were actually working for the evil organization known as Hive, and sought to destroy Snow and Lincoln's work, preventing the invention from ever being used or discovered. They trapped Caitlin within the engine and started it up in order to destroy her. Terrified, Caitlin panicked and tore out the wires for the coolant system. This had an unexpected result, and Caitlin Snow found herself bonded with ice and basically became a heat vampire. With her new ice-based powers, she escaped and killed all of the Hive agents. Craving heat as a result of her condition, she would later discover that exposure to Firestorm's powers temporarily reverted her to normal and would dedicate her life to pursuing him, seeking a permanent cure. Number 3, Zombie Spider-Man. I know he's another alternate hero turned villain, but what can I say? They get some of the spookiest origins because they kind of have the most to lose. Heroes have usually higher stakes than villains. When it comes to Spider-Man's origins in the zombieverse, he was of course infected with the zombie virus, which made him a villain. But as this change came upon him, he found himself tragically and horrifyingly feeding on his own family members that he tried desperately for years to keep safe. Spider-Man started off his brain and flesh-eating spree by eating those he'd loved the most in a horrific twist. He devoured Mary Jane and his Aunt May, likely crying all the while, I imagine, but unable to stop himself. He was just so hungry. Number 2, Bane. It's really no surprise that Bane became a supervillain considering he grew up in prison, serving time for crimes he did not commit, but that his father committed. Bane's father was a revolutionary who had escaped the prison, and when Bane was just 17, he was imprisoned in his father's place. He spent most of his life inside a cell that was connected to the ocean. All day he would spend in mind-numbing seclusion, alone in his cell, and at night he would have to swim for his life while trying to stay afloat above the water that filled up his prison cell almost to the very top, but not quite. Crabs and leeches would cling to his body, cutting him throughout each tormented night, and insects who happened to be sharing the cell with him would climb up on his face, seeking refuge. Every moment he ever spent outside of his cell afterwards would be focused on becoming stronger and smarter, preparing himself to one day escape the prison and accrue power once outside its walls. Number 1. Magneto. One of the scariest stories out there in terms of supervillain origins is that of Magneto, made more scary by the fact that it's actually based off of real-world circumstances experienced by many victims of the events tied to World War II. Magneto grew up being trapped along with many of his family in a camp by World War II German soldiers. Now, I apologize for not being able to say the words that I would like to say here to give this topic the weight that I think it deserves. I think we all agree. But there are certain words and phrases that we are permitted from speaking on this platform, so I apologize for my lighter turn of phrase here and my potentially perceived levity. I promise I do take this subject very seriously. And if you have problems with the fact that we can't say certain words, I would highly recommend that you contact the platform and let them know your thoughts on that. Because yeah, I think that's important to do. Young Magneto would not only have to suffer in these camps, but he'd also have to watch as one by one his family members attempted to escape and often got so close to being truly free, only to be reined back in and pretty much all end up dead in the end. He was forced into taking care of the bodies and disposing of all who perished at the camp as well, becoming a Sonderkommando, which must have felt like psychological torture as well as being grueling work. Sonderkommandos were actually real-world special units, by the way, that existed during World War II, made up of Jewish prisoners from the camps who were forced into disposing of the victims who had been killed in the camps, threatened with their own deaths if they refused the work. In the end, Magneto did escape, but even then, he was met with tragedy. He and his love Magda would escape and start a family, finding a home in a village in the mountains. But after he was revealed to be a mutant, the people turned on him and his family, burning their home to the ground. As Magneto attempted to save his daughter, who was trapped on the upper floor of their home, soldiers attacked him, preventing him from doing so, and she died in the fire.
Number 10. Batman 1989. Batman 1989 is an important moment in Batman history. A history of years of campy Silver Age Batman. It showed the world that you could have a more serious Batman. Yes, at the time, this was considered a more serious Batman. So in it we had Batman going up against his arch nemesis, the Joker. But this Joker had a complete origin that was shown in this movie, and a name. So in this film he's Jack Napier, who is second in command to a mob boss but having an affair with his girl, which is always a big no-no. So he gets a quick dip into a vat of acid when a plan to have him killed goes awry, and Batman is just a little too slow to save him. This transforms him into the Joker and gives us the famous "Give me a mirror" scene. Revenge on Gotham City, takes control of the mob and starts killing people with Smilex. And there's a really horrible, in my opinion, bit of canon added where the Joker was the criminal who killed his parents. Killed Batman's parents, that is. Just cuz. Take that, Joe Chill / Court of Owls, depending upon when it is. Number 9. Gotham. Let's just put Gotham on here now. So Gotham was a pre-Batman series, so like a series before Bruce was Batman, that proceeded to introduce every single villain pretty much, giving us their answer to whether Batman caused supervillains to appear in Gotham. Hard no in the Gothamverse. So what was interesting about this is that what the show's canon was going to be changed over time. So in season 1 we were introduced to Jerome Valeska, who wasn't the Joker because of copyright reasons. He was instead supposed to be an inspiration for the Joker. He was a circus kid who killed his abusive parents. He would then proceed to do many Joker things, like killing Sarah Essen, but they would still insist he's not the Joker. His laugh was supposed to herald the coming of the Joker, while most fans were just like, so he's the Joker. Then it got even messier. They brought Jerome back to life and then introduced his twin brother, Jeremiah. Then Jerome would die again.
Do you think I used to be the handsome one, right? How'd you find your way through the maze? Oh, bro. We might not look the same anymore, but we still think the same. Plus, he used to draw those stupid things all the time as a kid.
Jeremiah was a civil engineer who was sprayed with his brother's chemical, hence the beginning of his transformation. So these are proto-Jokers, but we would get performances and looks and actions that are reminiscent of the Joker across all the eras. But the showrunners say that what's exciting is that they're not the Joker. Look, if it looks like the Joker, laughs like the Joker, it's the Joker. Number 8. The Killing Joke. So this is a comic written by Alan Moore, a one-shot graphic novel with nebulous ties to continuity, written in 1988. This story would feature extensive flashbacks to the Joker's origin, and present him with a tragic backstory, that of a failed comedian just trying to get by and not making ends meet. So he turned to crime to support his wife and unborn child, only for him to get that organized and then for his wife and unborn child to die due to a faulty bottle warmer. But he can't get out of the caper, and he's put under the Red Hood, a mask he can barely see through, and when the confrontation begins with Batman, he falls right into that vat of chemicals, and emerges the Joker. Batman is unaware of the monster he has called of One Bad Day, which increases their parallel. This one comes up the most when people think of the backstory for the Joker, but it's not the origin of the Red Hood. Number 7. Detective Comics number 168. This is the man behind the Red Hood, and it's the first Joker origin story. In it, Batman and Robin are trying to solve the mystery of whatever happened to the master criminal, the Red Hood, who they had been pursuing, who had then jumped into a vat of chemicals to escape them. That's desperate. After the case is reopened by University, the Red Hood comes out of retirement, and eventually it is revealed that the Joker was the Red Hood. He was a lab tech who was tired of the daily grind, so he decided to steal $1 million and retire. This was 1951, go with the amount. However, after he dove into the vat of chemicals and came out changed, he realized his new appearance was horrifying, and he could become a master criminal. So he went with it, when life gives you lemons. Number 6. Batman number 450. This story is from 1990 and is called Wildcard, and is notable as it is one of those canon stories that acknowledges the Killing Joke as Joker's origin, something that certain stories would do while others wouldn't. The status that story occupies is interesting. It's almost like some people felt it was too good not to be canon. The way this story acknowledges it is pretty hardcore. Commissioner Gordon has a full-on breakdown when he learns that the Joker is on the loose. This because of his torture in the Killing Joke as well as what happened to Barbara. This story is actually interesting and involves an imposter Joker and bad jokes, intentional bad ones at that. It even gets the Joker to have one of those life is horrible laughs, you know, his favorite kind. Number 5. Pushback. This tale comes from Batman Gotham Knights, a monthly series that ran from 2000 to 2006 about the exploits of the Bat family and the extended Bat family. It had 74 issues. This is where War Games comes from, and also Bruce Wayne, Fugitive. Pushback would take the framework of the pre-established Killing Joke canon and tweak and expand upon it. Now instead of dying an ironic death, the Joker's wife was killed by a mob boss. This was an interesting one, and it seemed like it was a way to make him more sympathetic. Is your wife being murdered by the mob relatable? I don't know. Number 4. 0 Year. This was a year-long event from 2013 to 2014 during the New 52 continuity. This story was meant to redefine the origin of Batman, and so by proxy it tweaked some of his villains as well. You know, taking maximum advantage of that soft reboot. This origin would take us back to Detective Comics number 168 with a twist. So here it was said that pre-disfigurement, the Joker ran a gang of Red Hoods, a whole Red Hood gang. All these people running around in this really inconvenient, cumbersome mask. The Killing Joke established these had poor visibility, and I believe it just by looking at them. So why would you have a whole gang? They'd be taken out so easily, even by cops, even before Batman. Number 3. Batman Confidential issues 7 to 12. So Batman Confidential. This was a series with rotating writers and artists who would be depicting adventures of an early, younger Batman. In issues 7 to 12, we're back to the name Jack, which was first used in the story Payback, which was part of the Pushback arc. He's too good, life is too easy, what's a criminal to do? In this, Batman gives Joker the grin that splits his face after Jack escalates his crimes and he hurts one of Bruce's love interests. So he takes a batarang and ends up slashing his face, a disfigurement that Jack finds he likes, stating it feels nice to feel something. He's later taken to a chemical plant by some mobsters and dropped into an empty vat, a fall he's disappointed to have survived. And then the goons aim a bullet at him, but miss and hit a vat of antipsychotics, which cover him. They're liquid antipsychotics. His last thought is that he wishes he could see Batman again. He's flushed down the drain, surviving, now with his traditional clown-like appearance. He changes his name to the Joker and begins his reign of terror over Gotham. This one didn't really take off, and in fact is often forgotten. Even Batman Confidential is often forgotten, which is too bad. It actually has a really good Riddler story, A New Dawn, issues 26 to 28. Yeah, I remember. Number 2, Telltale. This origin comes to us from the Batman Telltale games. Now this is a game series where you play as a young Bruce Wayne and an up-and-coming Batman, but mostly as Bruce Wayne, which is unique since it focuses on Bruce and rejects the whole he is only Batman and Bruce is the mask, instead seeking a balance. So the series is littered with emerging villains, and you chart the course of how things turn out, well, within a kind of parameter. The Joker in this series is John Doe, who depending upon your actions will either become the Joker or something different. You first meet him as a patient in Arkham, but he really comes to the fore in the second Telltale game, Batman: The Enemy Within. The game starts off with him discharged for good behavior, but he's made some friends who turn out to be a criminal group. This series is unique and the characterizations are interesting. This one is a fan fave for people who like shipping the two as well, and your choices really impact the relationship, and people like that.
John Doe is dead. There's only Joker now.
You led John Doe to believe you were his friend. Turning against him on the bridge pushed him to become Joker. Sometimes it's as if Batman creates the evil he means to destroy.
It also gives Harley a lot of agency. It's just interesting. That's my word of the video. A more sweet Joker, kind of a lost soul. Who is he? No one knows. Which brings us to number 1. Number 1, no origin. So one of the things a company that has been going for as long as DC Comics has to deal with is how do you reconcile all these different origins, these histories? Well, with a character like the Joker, the idea is that he's an unreliable narrator, so he doesn't know himself. This allows all these histories to coexist without rubbing off against each other, because sometimes fans will battle over origins and who is right to the death, or at least until you're not talking anymore, which is always sad news bears. The Joker is a hard character to reconcile because he's had so many versions, having been around since the Golden Age. He's the first villain Batman faces in his solo comic all the way back in 1940 in Batman #1. There is an idea that the Joker's origin is multiple choice, and that is the best way to have him, that no one knows who he is. A good contrast to Batman, whose origin is such an integral part of him. It makes them even more opposite.
And at number 10, Thanos and Christmas. We all know that Thanos sucks as a parent. Whether you've seen how terrible he was to Gamora and Nebula in the MCU, or you've seen the way that he treated his respective daughter and granddaughter in the comics, you know that universe's best dad is not a mug the Mad Titan has tucked away in his cupboard. But sometimes Thanos' cruelty makes you feel so damn bad for him. And while we will get more justification on why he is the way he is thanks to a revised look at his origin story years later, more on that coming up, stories like these still manage to gut punch you a bit, even without the full context. Now, Thanos does not celebrate Christmas, but when Gamora was a girl, he felt inclined to give her as normal of a childhood as he could muster. His words, not mine. This meant that while he was hardcore training her to be an assassin, he also made sure to celebrate birthdays and Christmases with her. Case in point, these panels where he finds a doll in some rubble, fixes it up, and gives it to her for Christmas. So why is this sad? Because it leaves us so conflicted. Look at the blackness in his eyes, but look at the happiness on Gamora's face. Yet we know how crappy of a parent he is. Ah, that, my friends, is a three-dimensional character. Moving on. And at number 9, Doom Goes to Hell. Despite being one of Marvel's mainstay villains, from time to time Victor Von Doom has been portrayed as a tragic hero of sorts. Perhaps one of the most prominent examples of this occurred in 1989's Doctor Strange and Doctor Doom, A Triumph and Torment. Drawn by legend Mike Mignola, this graphic novel sees Doom attempt to save one of the only people he's ever truly loved, his mother. He's trying to rescue her from the depths of hell. Doom's journey ends up taking him to Mephisto, and he ends up incurring hell himself in order to save his mom. The whole thing is pretty tragic. From Doom's request for Doctor Strange's help, to Doom accepting flowers from a child, to, spoiler, his mother rejecting his rescue attempts, the whole thing leaves you feeling for Victor in a way that most readers never have before. Speaking of parents, in at number 8, Thanos' mom rejects him. Remember how we mentioned earlier that Thanos' origins were later explored, which then helped explain why the Mad Titan was, and is, so darn mad? Well, in 2013, a 5-issue limited series titled Thanos Rising was released, and it featured Thanos returning to his home on the Saturn moon Titan, getting all nostalgic, visiting the grave of his mother. We then find out that Thanos' mother straight up rejected him when he was born, literally seconds out of the womb, people. Thanos, who carries the deviant gene, looks different than the other Eternal inhabitants on his planet, who basically look like humans. The Eternals and the Deviants are mortal enemies, so, shocked by his appearance, she tried to kill him. Luckily for him, his father prevented this from happening, and later he would brutally murder his own mother by dissecting her. Oof. And at 7, Doomsday's origin story. Buckle in for this one, friends. So, Doomsday's claim to fame is that when he first hit the scene, he and Superman got into a colossal punching match that caused them both to knock each other out so hard that they seemingly killed one another. Spoiler alert, they didn't. But that's besides the point. When Doomsday was first introduced in 1992, we would learn about how this creature, who only cared about destruction and hate, came to be. A long time ago on the planet Krypton, there once was an evil scientist named Bertron. Bertron was a piece of work. He wanted to test evolution and use it to create the ultimate life form. Back then, Krypton was an almost inhabitable place. Its terrain was a hellish wasteland, but Bertron used that to his advantage. He took a baby and then tossed it into that wasteland. As you would expect, the baby died, no surprise there. But that is what Bertron wanted. He then collected the remains of the baby and then used its genetic material to clone another baby, one that was theoretically stronger. And then he tossed it into the Kryptonian wasteland too. Despite the hesitation and reluctance of others on Krypton, Bertron kept this up, doing it over and over again, cloning stronger babies and then basically torturing them, sending them to their deaths, and repeating the process for decades in order to achieve what he believed was a form of accelerated natural evolution. Eventually, the creature survived the temperatures and the terrain, only to be killed by predators. Bertron then repeated the cycle until the child could metabolize solar energy, adapt to whatever killed it previously, and could sustain itself entirely. So what did this creature do? It killed off all the predators on Krypton and then escaped, where it would then travel the universe, beat up some Green Lanterns, and eventually was killed off by a race called the Catalan, who managed to defeat it with a being made of pure energy called the Radiant. Doomsday was then given a dishonorable burial, wrapped up like this. But thanks to his nature, he revived himself, came back to life, and eventually ended up on Earth. And at 6, Korvac's suicide. Back in the late 70s, there was something called the Korvac saga. The conclusion to the saga, which occurred in the Avengers issue 177 in 1978, the titular villain committed suicide, with his dying act being to restore the Avengers and the Guardians characters before he bit the cosmic dust. So, what happened? Let's backtrack. In 1975, Marvel readers were introduced to a new villain, Korvac, also known as Michael Korvac or the Enemy, a character who came from another Earth set in the future. After he fled to Earth 616, he attempted to download Galactus' knowledge. He was also a brilliant computer whiz on his Earth, side note. And in the process, he was imbued with the power cosmic. This is where he became a threat and showed up on the radar of the Guardians of the Galaxy. They go after him and enlist the help of the Avengers. Now, the Collector, who senses a great threat is on its way for the Elders of the Universe, creates a daughter who he named Karina. She's essentially a weapon, but she ends up falling for Korvac, betraying Daddy Dearest. Eventually, he and Karina are tracked down and forced into combat. And in a critical moment during the battle, when it seems that Korvac has won, Karina hesitates, and Korvac senses doubt in her. Within a split second, he realizes that if his love doubts him, there is nothing for him in this world, so he kills himself. It's not particularly gruesome or gallant. Korvac just drops, glows a little, everyone is revived, and Karina is horrified. In general, Korvac's tale is a tragic one. Towards the end, he just wanted to be with the woman he loved. Although he did come back, and that's a whole other thing, but Keeping things grim, at number 5, Zemo almost commits suicide. Taking a detour out of the comics and instead a look at the MCU, let's talk about Helmut Zemo and his scene with Black Panther at the end of Captain America Civil War. Obviously, spoilers if you haven't seen it, but it came out years ago, so that's your fault. So while Cap, Tony, and Bucky are brawling away thanks to Zemo finally getting his vengeance, T'Challa stumbles upon Zemo sitting outside. Rather than kill him, he decides to break the cycle and become a part of it. He chooses to let Zemo live, preventing the villain from killing himself, with the intent of turning him over to the authorities because justice, etc. Zemo has lost everything and doesn't really even have the satisfaction of successfully pulling off his scheme. He just misses his family. The whole scene is a bit of a tearjerker, but T'Challa does the right thing. And hey, that now means we get Zemo returning to the MCU in the upcoming Falcon and the Winter Soldier TV series, so I guess everything worked out in the long run. Or not. Zemo's still bad. Presumably. And at 4, Bane's origin story. Bane is a complex character in the DC universe, so it's fitting that he has an atypical origin story. Bane was born inside of a prison. If that wasn't bad enough, in this prison in Santa Prisca, it had been predetermined before he was even born that he would be serving out a life sentence in his father's place. That's brutal. Bane was raised by other inmates and was forced to fight for food daily just to survive. As you can tell, this prison was super rough, and when he was a small child, he committed his first murder in there, hiding a weapon inside of his teddy bear. By the time he became an adult, he was experimented on and presumed dead after one of those experiments, and was then tossed out to the sea. But Bane wasn't dead, and you guys know the rest of the story from there. And at number 3, Valeria. Another Doom moment on this list. This one is a bit more specific than our last one though. In Fantastic Four issue 54 from 2002, Dr. Doom ends up helping the Fantastic Four instead of fighting them, in a way that you wouldn't expect. When Sue Storm was pregnant and Reed was away on a mission, Johnny Storm had to call up Victor to help deliver the baby. Now this was due to complications with the pregnancy because of the cosmic rays that had given the team their powers initially. Using his mystical capabilities, Victor safely delivered the child and requested that in return she be named Valeria. So why is this sad AF? Because Valeria is the name of the woman he had loved in the past, his very first love, who he was forced to kill. Now to be fair, he didn't actually have to, and killing her was a ritual of sorts to get new magical powers from some demons, but still, he's sad inside, alright? Feel bad for him. Up next at 2, Dexstar. Here we have yet another gut punch for you, especially for animal lovers. When it comes to animals, especially cats or dogs, it's hard to not sympathize with them when they're in need, even if that animal turns out to be a supervillain. Case in point, Red Lantern kitty extraordinaire Dexstar. Dexstar used to be Dexter, a stray cat who was adopted by a young adult living in Brooklyn, New York. And Dexter loved that owner dearly. Here's where the tragedy comes in. His owner was brutally murdered, which poor Dexter witnessed, so he was back on the streets, where he was then abused by street thugs looking for a cheap thrill. After they beat up Dexter, they threw him off the Brooklyn Bridge assuming he was dead. But instead, filled with rage, Dexter was granted a Red Lantern ring and killed his attackers. I don't know about you guys, but I really want to go home and hug my cat right now. Oh, why would they hurt a cat? But now he's a supervillain and can fight against them. Overall, I'm very conflicted, you guys. And last but not least, in at number 1, Magneto's origins. What's sadder than the Holocaust? Seriously, it is the most tragic event to ever occur in all of human history. Not to, try to compare tragedies or anything, they're all bad, but this one was like really, really bad. If you don't know your history, you should probably give it a Google and then prepare yourself to cry a lot. It's a narrative that Marvel borrowed when bringing Magneto to life, a creative decision that makes everything the mutant villain does that much more impactful. Now Magneto grew up during World War II and was a part of the Holocaust. A Jewish schoolboy living in Germany, you can imagine the hardship that he was put through, something we got a closer look at in X-Men Magneto Testament. By the end of the limited series, he's a soldier commando at Auschwitz, workers who were made up of prisoners who were forced to aid with the disposal of gas chamber victims. It's a sobering look at the atrocities from the Holocaust, all from the eyes of one of Marvel's most intricate villains.
In the number 10 spot, we have Walrus. There was no secret that Walrus was a comedic villain for Spider-Man, so he expectedly has a suitable origin story. Like many other villains and superheroes, Hubert Carpenter had his body augmented by his uncle with experimental technology. This tech was used to gift him with the strength, speed, and agility of a walrus, because that is the animal to strive toward when you're channeling your inner destructive criminal. Coming in at number 9 is Lady Stiltman. Yet another Spider-Man villain, Lady Stiltman not only has a ridiculous name, but also a ridiculous origin story. And in terms of story, we mean really none at all. What caused this villainess to don the ridiculous armor? Simply in admiration of the original Stiltman, because he was certainly a villain to look up to of all the villains out there. Turns out Callie Ryan, the face behind the armor, was the victim of a hoax sex scandal video, so that's interesting. What better way to hide from a sex scandal than with metal legs and a sucky career in crime? Next at number 8 we got Catwoman. Selena Kyle, who has played both supervillain and superhero in the world of Batman, has a very well developed origin story. It includes a life of abuse and running away that culminate into her becoming a criminal. However, early on in Batman number 62, Catwoman is found to be a flight attendant who suffers from amnesia and whose cat-inspired costuming comes because, well, her dad owned a pet store and she knew a lot about cats. Seriously? Luckily, no. This was just something she made up to avoid her past life of crime. That was a close one though. In the number 7 spot is Rainbow Raider. An enemy to the Flash, Roy G. Bigelow had dreams of being an artist, but he was in fact colorblind. As a kid, he made all sorts of paintings that he thought were quite nice, but other people started telling him the colors were clashing. You can only imagine the horrible trauma he went through being told his art was clashing. So when his optometrist father created a set of goggles for him that allowed him to emit different colored light, you just know revenge was on the mind. So learn from this and don't criticize budding artists, at least not to their face. They may attack you with subpar weapons of colorful destruction. Coming in at number 6 we got Gambler. This villain of Green Lantern's story isn't just lame, it is very convoluted and random. Stephen Sharp III was doomed to be a gambler from the start, because genetics. His girlfriend wanted him to prove this wouldn't happen, but before he could marry her, she ran off with another guy who was also a big gambler. So much for that. Stephen wanted to change himself on that day, so conveniently right then an armored truck crashed nearby. This
meant that he could steal lots of money and join the circus, as most suddenly rich folk do, which led to a life of crime. Don't ask, we don't know. Next up at number 5 is the Fiddler. So the Fiddler, who is an enemy of the Flash, started out as a regular thief named Isaac Bowen. He was caught and thrown in jail in India, and there he meets a fakir who uses the power of music to control snakes. Lots of those in prison, let me tell ya. From this guy, he learns the mystical art of Indian music. Out of debris in his cell, he magically makes a playable violin and proceeds to break out of prison using the power of song. He also murders his teacher, just because. This one is unique, I'll give it that. Next up at number 4, we have the Kangaroo. Frank Oliver, another Spidey villain on this list, grew up studying the kangaroos of Australia. He took studying to the extreme apparently. He not only watched them, he lived amongst them and ate them too. For the full experience, of course. What happens because of this is that he developed leaping abilities and decided to throw himself into the boxing ring with his super jumping abilities. They do say you are what you eat. In the number 3 spot is Lex Luthor. The famous and well-established Superman villain is not immune to a bit of a bad writing blip. His origin story was revealed in Adventure Comics number 271. Turns out he and Superboy were buds in their youth. Luthor accidentally set fire to his own lab, which Superboy put out with his super breath, but also spilled chemicals everywhere. Not only did this kill the artificial life form Luthor was cultivating, it also killed his hair. The man is a megalomaniac psychopath because he became bald. You could say it puts Superman in a bit of a hairy situation. Coming in at number 2, we have the Top. As a child, Flash villain Roscoe Dillon was obsessed with spinning tops. So obsessed that he kinda wanted to be one. He taught himself how to spin really fast. He spun so fast he was able to deflect bullets, and somehow the spinning also improved his intelligence, unlike most people who will collapse after even trying. So yeah, that's all there is to him. Man likes tops, man spins around like top, man becomes the top. Creativity at its finest. And finally, in the number 1 spot, we have Codpiece. Poor little Codpiece, and we do mean little. Apparently insecure about the size of his, shall we say, piece, this guy was super sensitive to comments that he misinterpreted and eventually had enough. He developed a suit that turned his junk into a weapon trunk. Let's see who's laughing now at his weapon of mass destruction. Nothing funny at all about a groin cannon.
Punchline was first revealed by DC in February when they confirmed she would be making her comic book debut in Batman issue 89, and would also be making an appearance in their Hell Arisen series and beyond. Although she has been labeled as Joker's new girlfriend, DC News has yet to confirm this to be true. For the most part, it seems this label has come from presumptuous characters in the comics and a sensationalization of her character by nerd press and media, which honestly is likely not something Punchline herself would be a fan of, I'm sure, given her stance on social media and misrepresentation. So who is Punchline really? Well, just because she hasn't been officially confirmed as Joker's girlfriend just yet doesn't mean you should write her off. DC has described her as a new addition and deadly villain for Batman's extensive rogues gallery, and as Joker's new partner in chaos. She was created to be the opposite to Joker's ex Harley Quinn, and working as closely with Joker as she is, it's easy to see how people could assume that she'll likely take Harley's place as Joker's new romantic partner. Joker himself has also appeared to be pretty smitten with her. We also know that Punchline will likely play a reasonably big part in Tynion's Joker War, appearing thus far to be Joker's new #1 henchman and his second in command. James Tynion IV is one of her co-creators, and he has commented a little bit on why he decided to write Punchline into his story, in regards to what kind of role he was hoping for her to serve.
The Punchline is a darker character than Harley Quinn. If Harley was the angel on the Joker's shoulder, Punchline is the devil. And that is really the core dynamic that we wanted to bring in with the character right away.
In his own newsletter, he revealed that back in December, when discussions were starting about Joker War, he knew he needed Joker to have a lieutenant in that war. Enter Punchline, who Tynion imagined as a polar opposite to Harley Quinn. In regards to her design by Jorge Jimenez, he remarked that he thought the design was awesome, and that he didn't want to wait to use her in a comic. His desire to rush ahead with introducing her character meant that she got inserted in Hell Arisen issue 3, where it was originally intended to have Joker aided by a generic person in a clown mask. Instead, they put Punchline as Joker's aide. But then Tynion realized that the issue of Hell Arisen would come out a full month before she would show up in issue 92 of Batman. Feeling weird about her first appearance happening in an event miniseries that didn't really tie into his Joker War, he decided instead to insert insert her as well into issue 89 of Batman, which hadn't been written at the time. They gave Punchline a few panels in issue 89 just to tease really. Then Hell Arisen came out, and since then we've seen her pop up a few more times, but it seems the best of Punchline is yet to come, with her and Harley set to finally duke it out in issue 93 of Batman, which is set to come out on June 23rd. With Punchline's introduction being considered as quite successful, it was no surprise when DC writer Jeff Johns revealed his master plan to use the character as one of his 3 Jokers in the anticipated Batman 3 Jokers miniseries. In a press release Johns made, the plan was revealed to have been plotted out by Punchline creators James Tynion IV and Jorge Jimenez, with 3 Joker artists Jason Fabok also on board. This is shocking, this is provocative, this could be a game changer. People were speculating that it could be possible, given that Johns revealed the first issue would involve a deadly car crash with Batman and the Joker, that the new character Punchline could end up inheriting the mantle herself, becoming the new Joker. But of course it was then later revealed that this was all a good old April Fool's joke. Haha, they got us. Considering how frazzled some people were over this potentially drastic change to the comics, I'm sure many were relieved to hear that the reveal was all in jest. However, I think it could be cool to see Punchline rise up even more than she already has and become a new major player in the world of supervillains. I'm all for more female awesome supervillains, that would be great. Now that we know a little bit more about Punchline and her intended role in the story as we know it thus far, it's time to take a closer look at just what we've seen of her when it comes to her actual appearances in the comics. Her first intended appearance was in Batman issue 92, but of course she's also shown up, as we already discussed, in Batman issue 89 and Hell Arisen issue 3. Following that, we got her origin story in the Joker 80th Anniversary 100-page super spectacular, and a day later she turned up in issue 3 of Batman's Secret Files. And finally, we saw the beginning of her face-off and her big intended appearance in issue 92 of Batman, which Tynion considers her first real appearance in terms of her actually being part of the story as opposed to just kind of a tag-along character. And this of course is where he had originally intended to introduce her. In issue 89 of Batman, we only got a few panels of Punchline. She appears briefly to tell Joker that Catwoman and Harley have found the corpse of Artie, who Joker was using as his own decoy body, one of his old henchmen, and that the two of them are leaving the cemetery. Joker tells Punchline that's all fine, and he's still some other people he needs to talk with first. Punchline also seems to remark that Harley doesn't look so tough in this issue. In issue 3 of Hell Arisen, we only see Punchline briefly. She appears here holding Mercy Graves hostage with one of her knives against Mercy's throat at Joker's hideout. She releases Mercy, however, at Joker's behest and leaves hand in hand with him after Joker warns Lex about getting involved with the Batman Who Laughs. And Lex has his own stuff going on with that in Hell Arisen. After those appearances, we get to some of the good stuff. In the Joker's 80th anniversary special, we get to see more into Punchline's origins. We learn that Punchline appears to be a college student named Alexis who attended Snyder College and was somewhat obsessed with the Joker. So obsessed actually that during their Dress Like Your Hero Day, she wore a Joker tank top. Ooh, pretty controversial. We find out that she shares some values with the Joker herself as she gives a speech to her dean about the world's problems really coming from everyday people like him, and how she plans to actually create her own world in her own villainous way. She kills the dean with her own batch of Joker venom, which we later find out the Joker helped her to make in order to wait and see kind of how far she'd be willing to go to prove herself to him. Needless to say, when she kills the dean in front of the Joker, he realizes she's the real deal and he allows her to join him. In Batman Secret Files issue number 3, Punchline makes a small appearance in the story Fool's Gold. She joins the Joker while he pays a visit to Deathstroke, trying to get him to commit to playing a part in his current scheme against the Bats. Punchline threatens to disembowel Deathstroke when he initially responds that whatever Joker's selling, he's really not interested. The Joker calls Punchline feisty, and Deathstroke refers to her as Joker's girlfriend. Eventually, she leaves the Joker to talk to Slade one-on-one, who does eventually convince Wilson to join him. In issue 92, Punchline really only comes in near the end of the issue, but her appearance is definitely a showstopper. She is with the deal broker when Harley and Catwoman are also permitted to join him. Catwoman is looking to make a withdrawal, but is surprised to find out that a bunch of clowns seem to be meeting with the deal breaker already, who tells her that in order for it to be possible for him to provide her with the service, they'll all need to make a deal. Punchline is there with the clowns, and after she threatens to skin Harley, Harley gets ready to swing her hammer. Both are on guard, and that's where the issue ends for Punchline. Tynion's Joker War is set to kick into gear starting in issue 95, and while their Dark Design story arc begins to come to a close, we'll likely finally get to see the outcome of this fight between Harley Quinn and Punchline in issue 93. Who will win? Well, we'll have to wait to find out. Punchline herself has been received well by fans so far, and there actually has been much hype over her arrival. The first issue she appeared in, issue 89 of Batman, is in its 3rd printing already. And a lot of that success is likely due to this new brilliantly written and designed character, which people were so excited about. People are excited to see more of Punchline, and Tinian and Jimenez are very proud of her as well as excited about her themselves. It's likely that all this Punchline love will end up giving her the momentum she needs to defeat Harley in the oncoming fight. But of course, Harley has the upper hand when it comes to experience, and is also a much loved character, so only time will tell. One thing is for sure though, we'll definitely be seeing Punchline in a more prominent role in the Joker War, and should she continue to skyrocket in popularity and should that event do well, we'll likely be seeing a lot more of her afterwards as well in the comics and beyond.